Okay, I've got about 3 minutes, everyone.
Okay.
I don't want anybody being Randall Pearson today. Did anybody catch that one?
No.
Yeah,
Nobody watches This Is Us?
Nope.
Okay.
I haven't in a while.
It just happened last week.
What channel?
This Is Us.
Yeah.
I got a fun new mask to match the downtown overhead structure, so that change colors.
There you go.
Where did you get that?
I don't know, it's just something I ran across on the internet.
Wow.
Your stuff's just in a different location.
Yeah,
I don't see it.
tattoo maybe.
One minute warning.
It may just be one.
Okay, according to my clock, it is 4 o'clock, and I will call the November 23rd Salina City Commission meeting to order. First, I would ask city staff for confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we will have roll call.
Mayor Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner France,
Here.
Commissioner Hodges,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here,
Okay, thank you. Since we're spread out across the community and I do not have a flag in my office, I'm not sure about anyone else. I think we're going to move into just, I'd ask everyone for a moment of silence, if we could. Thank you. We have no awards and proclamations. That will bring us to the Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for individuals that would like to address the commission about an item that is not on the agenda. As we get ready for that, I am going to turn it over to Deputy City Manager Jacob Wood. Since we are Zooming, there's a process you'll have to go through to be able to be recognized and address the commission. So, Mr. Wood, if you want to go ahead.
Okay, looks like we've got a few people on here that might be interested in speaking for the Citizens Forum. If that's something that interests you, if you could go to the participants tab. So if you're on a Mac or a Windows machine, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a box where you can click the participants, and it will pull up a box where participants along the side. If you're on an iPad, it's kind of at the top to the right. Pull that up, and if you would go to the raise your hand function, which is at the very bottom of that participant box, there's 3 dots and a little square. If you click on that and just do the raise your hand function there, then I can give you permission to speak. If anybody would like to do that, this would be the time.
And Mr. Wood, I will let you let me know if there's anyone with their hand raised. And if you do wish to speak, we ask that you please give your name and where you're from. We'll give them a few seconds in case they're trying to figure it out. Have anyone?
It does not look like we have anybody who's raised their hand.
Okay. Okay, with that, we will move into the public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time. Item 5.1.
Item 5.1, public hearing to consider adoption of resolution number 20-7901, declaring a certain structure located at 120 South Penn Avenue in the city of Salina to be unsafe and dangerous, directing that structure be repaired or removed, and establishing a reasonable amount of time within which the repair or removal of such structures shall commence and be completed.
Everybody could just be quiet while I.
Okay, with that, I will open the public hearing and I will turn it over to Ms. Driscoll for the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is kind of a unique circumstance, and I want to touch on a couple things before we begin. Due to the restrictions and going to a Zoom meeting, we knew we may have folks who wanted to come speak to the property today and discuss this. So I'm actually down in the commission normal meeting room where we have citizens spaced out who are going to want to speak to the public hearing, and we'll just come up to the podium and use my tablet to do that. If that would be okay with you.
That would work fine. Thank you.
Great. So I'm going to go into the staff report. One, I want to talk a little bit about the process because it is very important that we follow the process when dealing with a dangerous structure like this. Anytime that we are going to have to condemn a piece of property like this and make sure that everyone is well notified. And then I'll talk a little bit more specifically about this exact property and some of the attributes that have brought it to this situation. The purpose behind dealing with this is getting to the health and life safety issues associated with these structures. Particularly for this property located at 120 South Penn Avenue in the city of Salina. It was recognized that it was unsafe and dangerous, and we are needing to direct the structure to be repaired or removed and establishing a reasonable timeline within which the repair or removal of such structure shall commence and be completed. As part of this process, written statement from the building official sent to the property owner advised that the structure was unsafe and dangerous and that the city commission shall need to look at a resolution and schedule a public hearing in which to address this. At that time, October 5th, 2020, the city commission adopted resolution number 20-7883, which scheduled a public hearing for the city commission to address this issue further. As a part of that process, that notification was then posted in the Salina Journal on October 9th and October 16th. So that is 2 times prior to this public hearing as required by code. A copy of the resolution was mailed by certified mail to the property owners and other identified interested parties. These mailings were completed on October 9th, 2020. That leads us to where we are today, that the city commission must conduct a public hearing for the purpose of hearing evidence submitted by the city's building official, the owners agents, lien holders of record, and any occupants of the property as to whether the structures are unsafe or dangerous. Upon closing the public hearing, the city commission shall determine whether or not the structure is unsafe or dangerous. If the structure is determined to be unsafe and dangerous, the city commission shall adopt a resolution directing that it be repaired or removed and the premise be made safe and secure. This resolution must be published in the city's official newspaper and a copy mailed to the owners and identified parties of interest. The resolution for the structure shall then be the resolution of the structure determined to be unsafe and dangerous shall fix a reasonable time within the repair and demolition to be concluded for such a structure to be in compliance. Speaking specifically to the property, so we understand why this recommendation is happening, within the packet, you will see the building official's request for condemnation. Again, I will repeat, this is for 120 South Penn Avenue. The occupation status of this property is vacant. Taxes and other assessments owed for years. Property taxes for 2018 and 2019 are owed, totaling $893. The city and its staff have been working since 2017 to try and bring this property into compliance with established city codes. Violation notices for the building's dilapidation were sent in January of this year and expired with no work being completed to bring the property to code. A compliance agreement with this was then brought forward and signed by the city and the owner in March of 2020 to complete those same issues. But they were not completed within the required amount of time, which ended July 17th. On May 4th, a call was reported to Salina Fire Department for a possible fire at 120 South Penn. After the fire department responded, building services was notified that an unpermitted wood-burning stove was installed and being used. The flue was improperly terminated and was causing wood surrounding the vent pipe to smolder. After expiration of 2 previous attempts of getting the property up to code, it was determined by the building official that a dangerous structure assessment would need to be performed. That dangerous structure inspection checklist is included in the packet and is based on identified criteria, specifically from Salina Municipal Code, Section 31502. The provisions of Section 31502 of Salina Municipal Code, as well as the building official, are provided in the attached dangerous structures inspection checklist. Those items are based on 11-item checklist needed to meet for the structure to be concluded as dangerous. Particularly, 1, the exterior of the property is in a dilapidated state with holes, rotting materials, and is not weather tight. 2, interior of the property is demolished down to the stud walls and not habitable for human occupancy. 3, the electric and gas meters are not present and cannot be installed until building permits are obtained to install electrical service or proper fuel burning appliances. And 4, all of the windows and doors of the property have been boarded up to prevent entrance into the structure and will need to be repaired or in order to be approved. Jacob, if you could please put on the screen now the building inspector's checklist, which has the pictures, so that we could scroll through that. So as you'll see here, as I spoke of just a few minutes ago, the exterior of the property is not secure. There are holes, water issues. If you could keep scrolling, please, Jacob. There are no proper windows in the home at this time. If you could just keep scrolling. As you can see, this one side of the house, almost the entire side of the house is just plywood. It's not even, does not even have the remaining siding. If you could keep scrolling. Okay. Thank you for that help, Jacob. Therefore, commission action and recommended action includes 1, approve resolution 20-7901, finding that the structure at 120 South Penn is unsafe or dangerous, directing that the structure be repaired or removed, and the premise made safe and secure, fixing a time of 60 days on or before January 22nd, 2021, within which the repair or removal shall be completed, and authorizing staff to proceed with the demolition or repair if the owner fails to comply. Or 2, approve resolution 20-7901 as indicated in option 1 above, but fixing alternate reasonable times for commencement and completion and authorizing staff to proceed with the demolition or repair if the owner fails to comply. Or 3, postpone consideration of resolution 207901 pending additional information needed as directed by the commission. Or 4, decline to approve resolution 20-7901 upon finding that the structure at 120 South Penn is not unsafe or dangerous. Staff is recommending option 1.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Driscoll. With that, why don't we open it up since you have public there for public comment?
Okay.
If there's anyone, and
Who would like
please,
first?
please state your name and where you're from. And we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes or less.
I'm a little short. My name is Bev Bickle. I own property straight across the street from this property at 121 and 123 South Penn. This property has been, as reported, in ill repair, and people have moved into that and used it as a flop house, if you will. They take the boards off that's been put up. They've had propane tanks all through the yard, vehicles that don't run. They had a big storage unit container there that trash was in. They used our trash across the street. There's, as she said, the house is practically falling down. I know for a fact that structure is over 70 years old because I'm 70 and that house was there when our property across the street was built when I was a kid. So we would like to see it taken down, gotten rid of, and just have a vacant lot there.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tammy Parham, and I live next door to the property at 122 South Penn. I just bought the house in September of last year, thinking they were gonna fix this house and, it was gonna look nice. Well, since I've been there, it has gone downhill. He sometimes brings trailers over there and puts junk in them, and they like to drive the trailers around the house. Well, in the process of doing that, they have ran into my house. And the vehicle that they hit my house with had no insurance, so they didn't cover the damages. So if he can't cover the damages to fix my house, how's he gonna fix that house? I mean, there is plywood everywhere. I have 2 kids. It's not safe for my kids, let alone for them to be over there. They come in and out after city hours. So I would say 10, 11 o'clock, there's people over there. They camp out in there. We haven't seen them for a while, but there's been lots of traffic in and out after hours. When he does say he's working on it, it's at 1 o'clock in the morning. It'll be around 1 o'clock in the morning. We'll hear drills, saws, tractor trailers have been parked in the front yard. I've called the police before on them. I've called the city several times. I kind of just feel like nothing is getting done. It's just, well, he's working on it. Well, nothing is getting done. And I think everybody can see that in the pictures. So I just wish that they would tear the property down and, we would have an empty space, something safe for the kids in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Tammy, thank you for your comments and for being here today. Do we have anyone else?
Yep, 1 second.
Okay.
Yes, sir. My name's Joe Evilsizer. I live at 117 South Penn. That's across the street from it. I think that this house should have been destroyed a long time ago. It's nothing but a fire hazard. And like the lady before me said, that these people, when they were there, they was coming at all hours after midnight. I've heard them over there to 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. And as far as giving them 60 days to fix it, it seems to me like that's all that's been told to me since I've been talking to the people of the city. They're gonna give them.
Mr. Mayor, can you still hear us?
Yes.
Okay, just keep going.
Anyway, I forgot where I was at. Anyway,
Sir, you were talking about the 60 days to repair it, I believe?
yeah, I mean, this house has been there for, well, I've lived there 44 years, and it's been there that long at least, and it wasn't in much better shape then than it is now. And I believe this house should have been taken down a long time ago, because the lady that lived there years ago, the lady that owned it, I believe she's dead now, but I'm not sure of that either. I think the house should be destroyed without any compensation of any 60 days for anybody to do anything to it, because this man that was in there, this young man, whatever, and all of his friends, they did nothing to it but tear it up, more so than what it was. They tore the front porch off of it. It was there. I don't know why. But that might help the city tear the rest of it down.
Okay. Did you say your name was Joe?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to me.
Yes.
Mr. Greco? No? Okay, everybody here says they're good giving testimony.
Okay. With that, I will.
Mayor, do we want to, I'm going to ask if there's anybody that's participating online, if they want to raise their hand and have the option to speak. So if you have the participants tab open, if you want to raise your hand right now, if you would like to speak in the public hearing. And I don't see any.
Okay, with that, we will close the public hearing. I will turn to City Manager Scragg, and as far as the 60 days and I apologize, Joe, I did not get your last name, that was asking about why we had to wait 60 days. Could you explain that so the public will know?
Sure, and I may have to rely on city legal counsel to elaborate a little bit, but I think we do have an obligation to provide some amount of reasonable notice and an opportunity to repair before demolition. I think you have some discretion about what constitutes reasonable, but I don't know that we can skip that step altogether and proceed immediately to demolition. But I believe Mr. Banks is online and may be able to speak to that in greater
Maybe
detail.
Ms. Driscoll. I'm sorry, I should have probably asked Ms. Driscoll.
But I think too, staff also has to have reasonable amount of time to put the bid out to get a demo contractor hired. So that's just something to think about in which the expediency in this could happen.
Do I have any city commissioners that would like to make a comment or have any questions?
Is this structure's basement still standing open? When I took a look at it some months ago, you could walk into the lower portions of it, and the report suggests it's closed up now. And I guess my follow-up question would be, how far is it from Oakdale School?
I don't know the distance from the school in front of me right now, but I do know that a significant amount of boarding has happened in the last few months just to try and secure the property up for those immediate type of dangerous situations.
School is close enough basically to throw a rock to from the front yard. Is that correct?
I don't personally know, Mr. Commissioner.
Other commissioners?
I
Go
I
ahead.
just had a real quick question. I missed the last part of what Lauren said in regard to reasonable notice, I think it was. I guess my question is, and I don't know if you spoke to it, so I apologize, but is that something where, I mean, this has obviously been an ongoing issue, like a lot of these buildings are when they finally get to us, for literally for years. And I'm inclined to go with a shorter timeline, like 30 days, for there to be some movement on this property. I mean, can we set 30 days if we were to choose to go that route instead of 60?
I think, like City Manager Scragg noted, we should double check with legal counsel. But one of the points that I was trying to make is that even if we do shorten it to 30 days, if the commission wishes, we still would then have to go through the standard purchasing process in which to find a contractor to do those pieces. So I think both to the public who's watching and understanding how this process works, it's not on day 31 that a bulldozer shows up and we take it down. So, I mean, it is the first part in creating a timeline in which we then have the ability and are authorized through this action to then demo the property. But there is some time related to that.
Right, but it would afford you the opportunity, though, if on day 35 or 40 or whatever, if all of those things came together and you were able to proceed, there's a possibility at least that it might be able to proceed before 60 days. Whereas if we have the 60 days, then we know it'll probably extend beyond the 60 days as well.
Correct.
And I guess the question I have, and I think this is to follow up with Commissioner Hodges' question, if we shorten it to 30, that's the number. By then, the owner has to show that they've started work. It doesn't mean we tear it down on day 31. If we give it 60 days, then the owner has up to that 60 days to start some type of rehabilitation. And so it's kind of hard to hire somebody to tear it down until you know they haven't started rehabilitation. Would that be a correct assumption?
It is, and in previous structures where we've done work like this, sometimes the city commission establishes what is that substantial amount of work. As you can see, the original violation notice is in here, and it lists those things that need to be done. There were repairs to the windows, repair to the roof. We have in previous cases where we've said, not only within this notification window do you have to have commenced work, but you have to have 50% of the work or 7 out of 8 items accomplished or something like that, so that just because you pulled a permit doesn't necessarily guarantee that you get an extension type of situation. Because the objective here, at this point, we have had this conversation multiple times that the owner should be making progress, and the fact that they haven't is really one of the reasons why we're here.
Could we get go ahead, Mr. Commissioner Ryan, were you trying to say, or was that Commissioner Davis?
Davis, I was looking at the compliance agreement, of which there have been 2. And in, I don't know if it's section 4, but it's number 4 under D. Under the city's rights upon owner's failure to perform, that implies that the city has the right to, it looks like, demolish the building anyway if the agreement is not kept. And, this was done in March and there was an extension. So I would guess I'd ask the city attorney if just going from the code compliance agreement itself, if we actually have the right to go in and demolish the building anyway, just because the agreement wasn't kept.
Just to clarify, that language is to abate the nuisances and assess the cost. So that may be conducting repairs more so than demolition, which I don't know that this.
Okay, I see. You're correct.
Repair.
Okay, good point. Thank you.
Is legal counsel available? Are they online?
This is Greg Binkson. Yes, I am. And Ms. Driscoll, interrupt me if I misspeak at all, but I would think under the circumstances of this particular case, we could certainly accelerate the indicated timelines if that is the governing body's wish.
Yes, we could.
I don't know of any code or statutory prohibitions. I think it might be noteworthy to just make reference that the non-compliance with the prior agreements could very well be a factor in your time frame, but I would think that they could be accelerated if that's the wish of the commission.
Could just for the potential that a commissioner would like to make a motion that would take under consideration the 30 days. Does anyone have a calendar in front of them that would tell us what the 30 days would be?
Would that just move up the date on the resolution? Because right now it says that the work shall be commenced by December 22nd and completed, substantial completion by January 22nd. If we moved it up to 30 days, would December 22nd then take the place of the January 22nd substantial completion date? Or am I not thinking that through well enough here?
I think that's certainly possible. It's a question of your expectations as a governing body. Do you want the repairs substantially completed or substantially commenced by that timeline?
From my standpoint, I would say substantially completed.
Yeah.
I'm somewhat taken back that this has gone on since 2017 from looking at the structure itself. If I was one of the neighbors, I probably would have been a little more upset than they are about it.
Commissioner Hodges, I have verified that Wednesday, December 23rd is 30 days from today.
Thank you.
If I might weigh in for a moment, I'm with Mayor Hoppick, and this has gone on since 2017. It's gone through multiple compliance agreements. I'm not at all inclined to be permissive with granting, being able to substantially start the thing in 30 days. It needs to be complete.
And commissioners, you may recall from other projects that if the only deadline is substantial completion, that clock can run with no activity until we get to that substantial completion deadline. So if you really want to move this item along, you may want to leave the language in about commencement and set, I don't know, a 2-week time frame for commencement and a 30-day timeline for completion.
Gotcha.
And then if they fail to commence in 2 weeks, it's accelerated that much more.
I favor that approach. The problems for me are the proximity to the school and the fact that the structure is open, I believe, in the basement. So,
do I have a commissioner who would be willing to take a stab at making a
I'll do my best. I know you guys can come to my rescue if needed. I would move that we approve resolution number 20-7901, restating the dates in section 2 as follows. The work shall be commenced by December 7th, 2020, and shall be diligently prosecuted so as to allow for completion of all work no later than December 23rd, 2020. And if my motion needs to include the findings and the reason for that acceleration of the timeline, it would be non-compliance with prior agreements, proximity to an elementary school, the fact that Salina Fire Department has been called to deal with a fire on the property, and that the neighboring property owner's house has been physically damaged by the owner.
second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 20-7901.
Discussion or question?
Yes.
Is it logistically practical to expect that the city could give a building permit by December 7th?
Yes,
Okay,
and that is, I will say, for a complete permit.
okay. And I don't know if it's known, if that basement is open, is this a property that needs to be fenced until something is done just for the children's safety?
I do
If
not
that
believe
basement is open?
If it is open, we will address that, but at this time, I'm not aware of that, and I will verify that following the meeting.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve resolution 20-7901. The owner is directed to repair or remove the structure and to make the premises safe and secure. The work shall be commenced by December 7th, 2020, and shall be diligently prosecuted so as to allow for substantial completion of all work no later than December 23rd with, and I'm not going to try to read them off, but with multiple reasons for accelerating the timeline.
Just as one clarification, I believe Commissioner Hodges may have intentionally deleted the reference to substantial completion such that it is full completion.
Correct.
Okay, full completion. Okay. Duly noted. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Ms. Driscoll, thank you very much, and thank you for the citizens who showed up today on this item.
Thank you.
Okay, that will lead us to item 6.1, consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of the November 16th, 2020 meeting.
Do we have any additions or deletions to the minutes? If not, I will accept a motion to approve.
Mr. Mayor, move we approve the minutes of last week's meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda item 6.1. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That also passes 5-0. That will lead.
Mayor,
Yes.
this is legal counsel Greg Binkson. Just a reminder that we do likely have observers who are not participating in the Zoom format. So we do need to be watchful for identification of speakers, as would have been the case in our former format.
I could see everybody, so I never even thought of that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Hoppick here. That will lead us to item 7.1.
Item 7.1, update regarding Salina County COVID-19 response.
Mayor Hoppick here. I will turn it over to City Manager Mike Scragg.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Mike Scragg here. As you well know, a week ago today, you took up 3 items or had a conversation about COVID-related items and took 3 actions. And one of those was that you passed a motion that was worded to acknowledge that health-related orders associated with COVID-19 are more appropriately managed by Salina County and the County Health Department, and encourage Salina County and the County Health Department to identify and implement additional measures intended to address the recent increase in active cases and hospitalizations in Salina County. Following your action on Monday, I forwarded a written communication to the County Administrator, Phil Smith-Haynes, and it was shared with the County Commission, and they discussed it at their Tuesday morning regular meeting of the County Commission. And so your recommendation and your request was shared with them. They deliberated. They ultimately tasked their staff with preparing a health order for their consideration and scheduled a special meeting that was held at 3 p.m. Friday of last week. And so at that time, well, in advance of that, the health order was drafted and shared, much like we distribute our packets. The county shares their packets publicly. And so it was distributed and discussed on Friday at 3 p.m. So the draft that was shared was all formatted along the lines of a mass gathering limitation, essentially with a limit of 15 people. There are a number of exceptions in that original draft, and I've shared that draft with you. Coming out of that, County Administrator Smith-Haynes clarified with the County Commission that the County Health Director it has the authority to issue health orders. So the role of the county commission is a little bit unique. It's not that they need to ratify the county health director's health order, but they do have the ability either to overturn that health order or to amend it. And so they didn't have to vote for it to go into effect, but they had an opportunity to amend it or overturn it. So they took public comment, and ultimately, after deliberating, they made 2 amendments to the draft health order. One was to change the bar closure time that was provided in the draft from 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. And there was some discussion on the part of the public, and County Administrator Smith-Haynes clarified the rationale behind imposing an earlier closing time for bars. And one of the public comments was, what's magical about, at that time, 11 p.m. that was in the draft. Administrator Smith-Haynes acknowledged there's nothing magical about that. It's an attempt to balance business interests and economic interests, not wanting to close businesses, but at the same time restrict interaction and restrict possible spread. So it was intended to be kind of striking a balance. The County Commission deliberated briefly on that and decided to amend that from 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. The other item that they discussed was some feedback or questions they'd had about clarification of mortuaries. They weren't exactly called out. The draft had language about retail establishments and an exemption for them. It also had language about religious institutions, but there is an acknowledgement that while there may be weddings and churches and religious institutions and funerals, not all funerals occur in a church, and a mortuary in and of itself isn't necessarily a religious institution. So the County Commission chose to amend the applicable section of that order to include mortuaries as an additional exemption. I won't go into all the exemptions that are in that order, but you've received a copy of that in advance. One other item of clarification is we typically adopt annually the Uniform Public Offense Code. We call it the UPOC, and it includes in it a violation, which is failing to abide by a health order. So we already have, by way of our adoption of the UPOC, sufficient provisions in our code to make whatever gets adopted as a health order a city code violation. So there's not necessarily any action item needed from you as a city commission as relates to the health director's promulgation of a health order and the county commission's amendment of that health order. We do have independent home rule authority as a municipality, so you could take separate and distinct action. And that's kind of in contradiction to the motion you passed a week ago, acknowledging the role of the health department and the county commission. And it certainly could create a lot of disconnect and possible confusion between what we might do and what the county might do. I think our intention all along has been to be as coordinated as possible between the city and the county. So having said that, the county commission took the necessary action for that health order to go into effect at 12:01 a.m. Yesterday or Sunday. So it is in effect. I'm repeating myself, but there's no additional action on your part that's necessary for that to remain in effect. There's no fiscal impact associated to the city directly with that. We have had conversations with the police department about enforcement activities as it relates to the mass gathering, as well as the face mask ordinance, which we'll be discussing on today's agenda as well. The intent there is we would most likely need to authorize overtime. When I say we, city commission doesn't necessarily need to authorize it, but we would think that some dedicated staffing committed to enforcement would be the next best step. That's going to result in some overtime. That then is an opportunity to start with warnings and go out and contact businesses and citizens, make them aware of the recent change in the mass gathering limitations, confirm that bars are closing when they're supposed to, and then we can progress from warnings to citations if non-compliance is an issue. So with that, the options that we identified for your consideration or to take no action, resulting in the county's health order remaining enforceable by both the city and the county, or you could instruct staff regarding alternate actions that you wish to consider, which could very well result in a disconnect and possible confusion with our ordinance compared to what the county's done. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners?
Commissioner Davis here. As I understand it, the city, and I'm not necessarily proposing this as an action right now, but the city could propose closing bars earlier than 12 midnight, but we could not go later than 12 midnight. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that would be correct. That's the typical approach that's taken, is you can be more restrictive, but not more lenient. If for some reason the governing body was motivated and felt like a later time was necessary, I'd propose that would take coordination between us and the county before proceeding.
Okay.
Well, actually, I'd propose that in either instance, but
Right.
more so if you're going to be more lenient.
Any other commissioners have comments?
I don't know if it's a comment, comment and a question. First of all, I'd really like to thank the county for supplying the data that we have in our updated staff report in terms of the breakdown of the COVID cases by age and the fatalities by age. And what's jumping off the page to me is that the age group 20 to 40 is a lot higher than any other age group that we're seeing for positive COVID cases. And my question to the county or to staff would be, do we have a sense of where those cases are coming from? Are they coming from bars? Are they coming from churches? Are they coming from, universities? Do we have any information? And I know that they are hugely overwhelmed by the amount of contact spread or contact tracing that they're doing, but do we have any sense of what's really driving the infections in that 20 to 40 age group?
Not to my knowledge. The information I have may be a little bit more anecdotal in terms of passing conversations. The staff report we provided last week included some news articles and comments from Health Director Tiller, and I'm paraphrasing, but he, in a Salina Journal article, acknowledged that they're seeing spread in multiple different sources, whether it's weddings, churches, private gatherings, restaurants. And he went so far as to make the comment that essentially the county is a hotspot across the board. So I think they've seen data, as they do contact tracing, they may be able to trace an individual instance back to a location, but I have a sense that it's so widespread that they have not indicated, one unique source compared to others.
Commissioner Davis, did Mr. Tiller happen to mention why, and I don't know the answer to this myself, but why other communities have generally chosen 11 p.m. as the time to close the bars as opposed to 12? And I don't know whether, some mega organization has done some mega research and just,
Right.
looked at, hours of closure and realized you got to cut it off at 11 to control behavior.
Well, actually, Mr. Tiller, I guess he was on the phone with the county commissioner, and County Administrator Smith Haynes was present. Their comments, and again, I'm paraphrasing, but their comments were more of an acknowledgement that there is no hard and fast rule of what is the right time. It's just trying to strike a balance between commerce and restricting activity in a way that might limit exposure and spread to some degree. But I think you've seen in the county staff report that's in your packet, they did inventory their peer communities and counties and what they were doing, and I think they're trying to gauge that. But I haven't seen anyone provide comments or justification about one time over the other as scientifically being more effective.
I'll have some of my medical students do some research this week.
Well, it seems
See if they can come up with an answer for that.
Seems intuitive that the less contact it moves the needle in the direction we want to go. But I can't speak to 1 a.m., 12 p.m., 11, 10.
Well, I think that generally the more sober a person is, the better their decision-making process is, and I could see a simple chain of events happening with increasing alcohol blood levels. I don't know if anyone has quantified that yet or not.
Yeah, if you look at other communities, they seem to be monitoring and adapting. So I don't want to create false expectations, but I think over time, as we continue to monitor these levels, we may have another conversation about whether additional measures are appropriate. And that could be a change in that time.
Commissioner Ryan here. Do we have any information from the health authority about the patient demographics at the hospital? What age groups are winding up at the hospital?
Yeah, there is a graphic that's in the packet that breaks out the hospitalized cases by age. And
Commissioner Hodges here. Mine didn't appear, or the one I've accessed online doesn't look like the ages are labeled, but that I don't know.
Oh, really? There's a separate table in mine that has 45 to 54-year-olds. There's 10 cases.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was looking at the graph above that. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So up to the age 45, it's 1 or 2 cases per age category. 45 to 54, there's 10. 55 to 64, 11. 65 to 74, 17. And then the next 2 age brackets are 9 apiece. So looks like there might be a little bit of looks like the highest concentration is 65 to 74, bracketed by everything from 45 to 85.
Thank you.
The one thing, I did talk to someone from the hospital, and it did seem like the older they were, the longer their stay was, which makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'll bring it up a little bit later, but I did also ask, and I think I asked this last week of the county administrator, and he didn't have an answer as to Saline County hospitalizations versus surrounding counties. And for a long time, it was running about 50-50. And he did say that with this uptick that there does seem to be more Saline County, but for a long time, it's been running at maybe at that 50-50 level. So any other?
Commissioner Hodges here. So I'm just kind of looking at the rest of the governing body. At this point in time, is there any support for adapting the bar hours back to what Mr. Tiller's original recommendation was at 11 o'clock?
Yeah. Originally, this is Commissioner Davis. I was in favor of it because I'm assuming that I was hoping certainly that his 11 o'clock was based on best evidence from other locations. But I don't know that for a fact. I would like to see if there is some data that suggested, and my logic may be overly simplistic. Just, more people drink, the closer they get, the less they're going to protect themselves. And it's not just COVID. I mean, that's applied to behavior over the last 3,000 years. But I just thought if the health officer had a reason for making 11 o'clock his suggestion, that we should look at it. I'm not allergic to sales tax revenue coming in, but if there's a medical reason why cutting off that extra hour is good, you don't want people to cram it all in between 10 and 11, but I would like to see where the 11 o'clock came from. But
can we ask City Manager Scragg, could you maybe touch base with the County Health Department to see if they had any input on that for us for next week?
Certainly, I can do that and report back. I don't want to paraphrase for them, but I think a similar question was put to them at the county commission meeting, and there was an acknowledgement on their part. It was kind of a discretionary decision based on what they're seeing elsewhere, but they didn't offer up a scientific analysis beyond that because they weren't aware of that being out there. But I can certainly follow up.
Any other comments on this? I guess with that, I will look to Deputy City Manager Wood to see if there is anyone who in the public that would like to comment on this. If so, please.
Before, if you'd raise your hand in the participant list here, I'll see if we can recognize you. And I'm not seeing any. Oh,
Okay.
wait, we do have one.
Okay. Okay, it looks like somebody does not know how to raise their hand.
We have one. iPad is the name there, and I've given you permission to speak. If you could give us your name and where you're from, and you can make some comments.
Dalton McDowell from Salina. I would not recommend moving that to back to 11 o'clock for the bars and all that, due to the simple fact that they have been through so much at this point. Some of these bars, if they get shut down due to COVID again, they probably will not be able to survive. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dalton.
Jacob, we did have one party say they didn't know how to raise their hand in chat.
Yes.
Okay.
Sharon and Jeff, I've unmuted you there. If you want to go ahead and speak.
Okay. We have a couple other things dealing with COVID. Maybe they'll be able to find a way to raise their hand and reach us as we move forward. So, okay, anybody else? Mr. Wood?
Not at this time.
Okay. They have a lot to discuss, but can't get their hand raised, so I don't know. Okay.
It looks like they posted another chat comment.
They have been unmuted.
Yeah, they're unmuted, so I don't know if there's a speaker issue.
Maybe they don't have the speaker turned on there, so on their iPad or whatever they're using. Okay, we have no action to take on 7.1, I guess. So we will move on to 7.2.
Item 7.2, first reading ordinance number 20-11045, requiring the wearing of masks or other face coverings in public spaces. Item 7.2A, declare a compelling public purpose exists to allow first and second reading on the same day at the discretion of the governing body. Item 7.2B, second reading ordinance number 20-11045 at the discretion of the governing body.
Okay, Mr. Scragg.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Mike Scragg, City Manager again. As I just mentioned, you took 3 actions on Monday related to COVID. This is the second of those. And you had discussion last Monday about the face mask ordinance and enforcement and any revisions that you might want to take up. And ultimately, there was a motion made. There was some discussion. The motion was restated. And so the two statements of the motion differed slightly. But the gist of it was that you tasked staff with preparing an amendment for your consideration to clarify that face masks should be worn in indoor public spaces, regardless of social distancing, when another person is present. And Commissioner Davis was the motion maker. I took the opportunity outside of the meeting to just verify the motion maker's intent as we tried to draft the amendment to the ordinance. And so, and then additionally, it came to my attention today that the packet didn't originally include a red line copy of the ordinance, but you should have since received that. Essentially what we've done in we've added a definition of room, which initially seemed like that's pretty straightforward and may not be necessary, but I would tell you that as part of the county commission conversation, a citizen questioned what constitutes a room and kind of underscored the need for that definition. So We have defined it as a division of a building enclosed by full height walls, floor, and ceiling, just for clarification. Section 2A has been amended to more clearly state that a mask should be worn inside any indoor public space. And then we've amended Section 3, which deals with the expectations of business organizations and nonprofit associations to more clearly communicate that it's expected of them that they must require all employees, customers, visitors, members, or members of the public to wear a mask when they are present within the business organization or nonprofit association's indoor public space. And then in Section 4, we added an exemption in Section L of Section 4. And the exemption is persons who are in a room with no other person present. So it creates the presumption that everyone must wear a mask within an indoor public space. And then there are the exceptions A through L from that requirement. And the added exemption now is that if you are in a room with no other person present, you then would not have to wear a mask. Well, I understand that may be kind of a circuitous route, but from an enforcement and clarity standpoint, that's probably the most effective way for the ordinance to be amended. So essentially, the only change that this ordinance as it's presented to you currently makes is it eliminates any references to when social distancing can't be maintained and removes any uncertainty about, for an example, you're in the grocery store and you think you can maintain social distancing in a particular aisle. If you're in a indoor space and there's more than one person present in that space, the expectation is that you wear a mask unless you qualify for one of the exemptions stated in the ordinance. With that, there's no fiscal impact directly associated with this action item. I've touched on enforcement previously that would be a staffing expense, but is not an action item that you would need to address as part of this. As far as options, you could approve the ordinance as drafted. You can approve it with additional amendments as you deem appropriate. You could postpone consideration to a specified date and time and provide additional direction to staff in terms of information you'd like for your consideration. You could approve it on first reading and then ask for additional information before second reading, or you could vote to deny the ordinance, which would result in the current face mask ordinance remaining in effect. And secondarily, if you feel that a compelling public purpose exists to expedite this item, you could make a motion deeming that compelling public purpose exists and take up second reading this evening as well. And one last thing I would note that the ordinance includes the typical effective date language that it will be in full force and effect after its adoption and publication once in the official city newspaper. So typically that occurs at the end of the week. So that would allow for a little bit of lead time between your adoption, assuming that you adopt it this evening, and the effective date. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, questions from the commission? Questions or comments? Okay, do we have anyone from the public who would like to weigh in? We have Jacob. Can you read their full question there, and maybe we'll read that. I know they can't seem to get the volume or their.
Okay, yeah. So from Sharon and Jeff, it looks like the question is, what are the ages and other health conditions of deaths in Saline County? What are the ages and health conditions? So I don't, there is some information in the packet about that, about the deaths by age. There's nothing about additional health concerns though, and I don't think we've had that information from the county.
And I would note as well, and it didn't occur to me till I was reading it as part of the meeting, but the data that's provided related to deaths, I believe maybe the state numbers in their entirety. It has a total number of deaths of 1,266, which is certainly not just Saline County. The COVID-19 dashboard graphic that is in your packet is a screenshot of the information that the county puts out on their webpage. And so that is a stacked bar graph, and it includes a red bar for the number that are deceased, and that is Saline County specific information, but I don't know that I can discern. It's on the screen there. So the red graphics at the top of the bars for 40 through 49, 50 through 59, 60 through 69, all the way through 90 through 99, graphically represent the deaths by age range, but I, with this graph, cannot discern the exact number for each one of those.
Mayor Hoppick, could I make a comment?
Yes.
You know, I hope there's no one out there so self-centered that they think the rules should only apply if they're at risk. You know, we all have a responsibility to try to protect each other. And it really doesn't matter who has the at-risk condition. I mean, I have several, you know, I'm sure a lot of us on this screen, just because of our age, have one important one. But, you know, young people, middle-aged people all have risk factors. But I'm not going to do something that just protects me. You can't run from this thing. The best you can do is try to protect yourself and others. I mean, you minimize your risk. So it really doesn't matter if you don't fit into one of those high risk groups, because you can give it to somebody who does. You know, so I wouldn't really focus on, you know, well, it must have been their fault that they got sick. They had that risk factor. I mean, that's a very self-centered, uncaring way to look at this.
Commissioner Hodges here. I just want to say how wholeheartedly I agree with your comments, Commissioner Davis. And also the other one that I've heard as well is that, well, this only affects older people. Well, I'm just not willing to write off everybody over 45 or 50 or, you know, wherever that line is where it becomes a lot more severe of an illness for someone, because I sure know a lot of vital 75 and 80 and heck, even 85-year-olds out there. And I just think it's incumbent upon all of us to do as much as we can, not only for ourselves being self-centered, but for people that we interact with.
So this is Mike Scragg again. Since we're on a Zoom meeting and I'm in my office, I had the ability to go online and check the county's dashboard. So just for the purpose of more specifically answering the question, you know, each one of those age ranges is a 9-year block. So at this point in time, the county's dashboard reports the following for each of these age categories: 40 to 49, 2 deaths, 50 to 59, 1, 60 to 69, 3, 70 to 79, 6, 80 to 89, 2, 90, and I assume and above that I don't know if that stops at 99, of 3. And when you total that up, that is 15 that are currently being reported.
Does Ryan or Franz, do you have any comments? I have a couple comments to make when everyone's maybe through.
Mr. Mayor, we do have a couple of people that have raised their hands here.
Okay.
If you want to let them go.
Yeah.
Angie Lashley had her hand up. If you still want to speak, I'll give you access here.
Okay, and we will remind them they have 3 minutes. Please name and where you're from.
Okay, Angie, you should have access now.
She still shows muted on my screen. Does she need to unmute on her end, maybe?
Yeah. Okay, Angie, I just unmuted you. You should be able to unmute yourself. There should be a box that pops up.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Here you go.
All right, thank you. I just wanted a couple of comments, and I speak to you as the leader of the YMCA, as the president and CEO, Angie Lashley here in Salina. Personal hat versus professional hat, I am definitely very concerned about the COVID, the numbers that we're seeing continuously. But the concerns that I have as a business leader is the enforcement. I mean, our frontline staff are getting yelled at all of the time when they are trying to enforce this. within, our facility. And I hear that from other organizations and other businesses. And it puts our staff in some really hard times. So I hesitate about putting things in place that we cannot enforce. And then the other comment that I would make is just, we've had a couple of members and staff that have had COVID and been positive, and in the conversations with the health department, they're telling us that the masks don't necessarily matter as far as who has to quarantine if we're in meetings together or those kinds of things. So again, just making sure that all of our data is correct and we are data driven on some of these decisions would be my request to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. And I think City Manager Scragg can answer to the quarantine if you're wearing
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Ms. Leslie's correct in that if, and my personal experience was I was in direct contact with someone that tested positive. We both were wearing masks, and the fact that we were wearing masks did not prevent my being directed that I needed to isolate. So to say that masks don't matter, I don't know that the health department says there's no value in masks, but they're not sufficient to avoid the need for isolation if you're in direct contact with someone that tested positive. With respect to enforcement, we've talked about increased enforcement efforts on the part of the police department, and that might help strengthen the resolve and create some increased effectiveness in the community. But undeniably, individual businesses still will get pushback, and it will understandably could be difficult for them as they try to interact with individuals that don't want to participate. I've personally observed that at least in 2 instances in a retail establishment where I have to commend the retail staff that were doing their job and hold them accountable, but it was a confrontation that frankly kind of took me back a little bit, how adamant the citizens were that they didn't want to wear the mask until the staff person held them accountable.
Commissioner Hodges here, to what you just said, and to what Ms. Lasley said as well. A lot of times the frontline staff, it's not the management staff, it's not the administration, it's the person who is, on the lower end of the wage scale and the lower end of the staff hierarchy. So it places a really big burden on, disproportionate with their pay or their responsibility level. My question is, if we eliminated some of these exemptions in terms of the medical condition exemption, let's see, like A, B, C, or not A, sorry, B, C, D, those seem to be the 3. I feel like you would give some of those people who are having to make some of those requests of their patrons that they can say, I'm sorry, that's not an exemption, this is the ordinance. And it also might make it easier for Salina Police Department officers to enforce it instead of being told at every turn that there's some medical exemption.
I think that's within your purview as a governing body. It becomes
if Miss Lasley is still available, I would, she might want to
yes, please
answer back in, because I think what I have heard, it's not from people that are claiming a medical exemption. They're just not wanting to wear them. I don't think the medical exemption is what's actually being used. So,
okay.
And if,
yeah,
do we have any other callers also, Mr. Wood?
Yes, we have one more, Dalton McDowell. You should have access now.
My only question would be is how would the Salina Police Department, with their being short, with their how would they be safe while doing that? Because I've seen some pictures of some other law enforcement officers that are doing it, that are wearing full hazmat suits. I don't see enforcing really helping anything. I honestly believe that if people are going to wear them, they're going to wear them. If they're not, they're not. That's all I have.
Dalton? Okay, anyone else out there? Mr. Wood?
We do have one more. Give you access here. Here you can have access now. If you state your name and where you're from.
Jerry Brown.
Yes, Jerry.
Am I in? One of the things I wish you could discuss sometime is watching the hospital capacity as it changes. As the hospital, the main thing holding us all together is that hospital capacity. We can't overrun it. It seems by the news reports that it is, several of them are being overrun, like in Topeka, Kansas City, they're already at capacity. Looking at the dashboard, it looks like we still have capacity, but it seems like that capacity is being diminished. So as city commissioners, where's the line in the sand? Where is it that you say, where you start really closing things up so that we don't overrun our capacity in the hospitals? That's one worry. The other one is we keep talking about masks, and I've studied masks since March. My wife and I started producing, we produced about 500 cloth masks for churches and a nursing home and so forth. We quit doing that because they're only about 30% effective. And we found out that if you put a piece of electrostatic cloth in those masks, they become up to maybe 40, 50%, but that's still not good. The people that we see on TV like CNN and MSNBC say that we got to up our game on masks, that it needs to be a mask that's at least 3-ply minimum and has a piece of this non-woven.
We lost you, Jerry. Oh, shit. Did I unmute mine?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mayor.
Can you hear me? Okay, I thought maybe
I can hear you.
Message that. So my two questions were, how do we get across to the public that maybe we need to up our game on masks, and then to watch that capacity number change so that the city can maybe do some things as they see it going the wrong direction before it gets too late. And then we try to do something. That's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Mayor, we have one more. Sherry, I'm going to unmute you here. You should have the option to.
More than 3 minutes.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So everyone is concerned about this COVID thing. But my concern is, where's the line between preserving our economy, people's livelihoods, and mitigating the risk factors of death? And then I wanted to also, I could start my video too, I'm sorry. I could also talk about the hospital. The hospital is over capacity every winter with the normal winter things. Dr. Freelove was talking about that on his video. Now, of course, COVID is exasperating that this year, of course, but at the point he did his video, they were about half capacity of their COVID beds, but they are understaffed every winter and dealing with the things that come along in the winter. So as we do consider the hospital capacity, we need to think about what's typical. And also I want us to keep in mind people's livelihoods if we're too much shutting things down, people lose their jobs, and we've already experienced a lot of hardship to people. So that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you, Sherry. I'll go ahead and let it. Do we have anyone else? Mr. Wood?
I don't see any at this point.
I have several comments to some of the comments made, but I was going to allow other commissioners to weigh in if they want.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Davis. There is a balance that I think we're trying to keep between economic survival and health. And I don't look at just the deaths, because every time you have a sick person, chances are their family's quarantined, which means the other spouse isn't going to work, the kids aren't going to school. Some of their other employees that they work with may have to quarantine. So, businesses can be hit hard, particularly smaller ones. But, we have people who are not coming in for their regular health maintenance, or for semi-urgent conditions, people are staying home. So there's a second wave, this indirect health consequence of COVID. It doesn't show up in the COVID statistics. I have a lot of people who are afraid to come get blood drawn. They don't want to go near the hospital or a lab. They're not coming in for their test. So it's not just the deaths that we have to keep track of.
I hope the public realizes that what we're doing, and I know one of the comments I saw pop up was a concern for students, and one, Mayor Hoppick here, and one of the reasons that we're doing this is we're trying to keep our schools open. They're running short on teachers. It's not the students that are actually getting as ill, it's the teachers. And so what we're trying to do is keep the schools open. And if we keep parents at work, or they don't get exposed, and they don't have to have their children stay home either. I think we've all made the comment that what we're trying to do here is to keep the businesses open. We have yet to talk about closing down businesses. I think we all realize that first time when we had essential and non-essential businesses, it really hurt our small businesses. And I think you have 5 commissioners sitting here that do not want to see that happen again. When it comes to the capacity of the hospital, and I can speak a little bit because I have a wife that works there, their staff is being pulled in multiple directions, and they are short-staffed. And it's not that they don't have beds available, they don't have the nursing staff to take care. And not only do we have the usual illnesses, but we also have the COVID cases that are adding to that. And I think what we need to realize is that there's individuals out there that you could have a heart attack today, you could have a stroke, you could be in a car wreck, you may not have an ICU bed to go to because they're all taken up by COVID patients at this time. So I think what we're trying to do is to protect the public. I do believe that we also might want to think about, as a commission, talking to the county commission and maybe even Salina Regional Health Center, to send a letter to the surrounding counties and ask them to take some action because, as I said earlier, we're taking in a lot of patients from out of county. And I think we ought to call on them. I think if you looked at the deal, we have Lincoln, Ottawa have no restrictions. I don't know what Concordia has in some of them, but I think we ought to address that perhaps as a commission. And those were my comments.
Commissioner Hodges here. I love that idea. I think that is such a positive thing to do, to let people know that, here in North Central Kansas, we all rely on each other. And I did just check the day or the Monday email from the county. And in addition to 144 new cases that we've had since Friday, we're also up to 31 hospitalizations. And staff is pulled a lot of different ways. And it's not just, medical or surgical floor staff. It affects everybody. It's surgical staff, it's, support staff. So I think that's a fantastic idea, Mayor Hoppick.
I agree, Mayor.
As I said last week, we can make all the rules in the world, but again, whether it's wearing masks or social distancing, we as a community need to take personal responsibility. This is it does seem to be getting worse. And we have college students coming back next week, and that's going to add a whole new layer of issues, I believe.
I might weigh in. I've kind of kept silent. I was going to comment and urge the staff to move forward with some form of enforcement actions. While I don't think non-compliance is a huge problem, at least not in the places I've been, there is some, and I think it would be good to make it clear that this is a serious thing and we're taking it seriously. I do know, I've heard stories of other places where compliance is maybe not so good. And that needs to be considered. The idea of contacting the surrounding counties, I think, is a good idea. Most of them have not imposed restrictions, and most of them are seeing fairly steep inclines in cases based on their population. So I think that that's a good thing. I would, point out that the ordinance we're talking about relates to masking. It doesn't relate to the other items that we talked about under the county health order. Masking, from what I have been able to gather from the literature, and I've looked at some of the research too, mine isn't quite as pessimistic as Mr. Brown's. The stuff I've looked at says somewhere between 40 and 50% effective for masking. And that is kind of the experience we saw here when we implemented masking and the cases dropped. It's also verified by the recent study done by Kansas University that was cited by the CDC. They came to the conclusion that it's about 50% effective. Well, at 50%, we're all 50% better off, but it doesn't mean that if we're in the presence of somebody with COVID, it doesn't guarantee that we're not going to acquire the infection. It just gives us a 50% break, which is, I imagine, the reason that the quarantine is still required. It's not that there wasn't contact, there was, and we need to be careful with that. I think the ordinance as it stands is good. It eliminates that 6-foot exemption indoors and makes it perfectly clear that if you're inside, you're expected to wear a mask. It is my presumption from reading the ordinance, or as I understand it, that the 6-foot exemption still applies in outdoor venues. Is that correct?
Yes. Let me find that language for you. All persons shall cover their mouths and nose with a mask or other face covering when they're in line and waiting to enter indoor public spaces, waiting while outdoors in public spaces and unable to maintain a 6-foot distance between individuals, not including individuals who reside together, with only infrequent or incidental moments of closer proximity. So outdoors, 6 feet, non-family member, unless it's infrequent or incidental moments of closer proximity.
Okay.
Do I have a commissioner that would like to make a motion?
Yes, sir, you do, Commissioner Davis. I move we approve ordinance number 20-11045.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 20-11045, requiring the wearing of masks or other face coverings in public spaces. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes.
Sorry, this is first reading. Sorry.
Yes, that's 5-0. Do we have a reason to declare this a compelling?
Mayor Hoppick, I move that we declare compelling public interest exists to allow first and second reading of the ordinance on the same day. This is an important public health issue which should have a benefit in reducing our current health crisis.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to declare a compelling public purpose exists to allow first and second reading on the same day. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Does that require a roll call?
What's that?
Yes. Sorry. I was multitasking, but we should take a roll call on the second one.
Yeah, well, we need a motion.
That's the, yeah.
Do we have a motion for,
Yeah, Mayor Hoppick, I move we approve ordinance 20-11045 on second reading.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 20-11045 on second reading. We will have a roll call.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. France,
Aye.
Mr. Hodges,
Aye.
Mr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hoppick.
Aye. That passes 5-0. And City Manager Scragg, could you answer when that will take effect due to publication, or do we know?
Yes, it'll be effective upon publication. We'll need to coordinate with the newspaper, and typically that's end of the week. So Friday or Saturday would be my best guess.
Okay. Could you make sure that we are notified, and I'm guessing the public will be notified when that'll.
Yes, we should know in advance of when the newspaper plans to publish it. We can let you know, and we'll certainly get the word out publicly.
Okay.
Mayor Hoppick, if I could just ask a somewhat related and to the city manager and city attorney. Historically, what is the proper protocol or etiquette for engaging neighboring counties in discussions similar to what we just had?
I don't know about historically, but I guess my suggested approach is if that's something you as a governing body wish to do, staff could provide you staff support by drafting a correspondence to be signed by each of you as a governing body member. So, the communication that went to the Salina County Commission, you're able to provide a little bit clearer direction, and I signed that correspondence more as an informational reporting of what you did on Monday. I think this takes on a little bit different feel in that you're reaching out to other counties and imploring them with a little bit more of a backstory. I think I've got enough information of your rationale that I could draft something that I'm hopeful that you would find acceptable. So my suggestion would be if you would like me to do that, you provide that instruction by motion. And I guess the one question is the counties that you'd like that communication to go to. If we just look physically at the counties that join us, that would be Ottawa, Dickinson, McPherson, Ellsworth, and Lincoln. And then Marion County does touch us corner to corner on the southeast.
Mr. or City Manager Scragg, this is Mayor Hoppick. I would like, not only for us, maybe I would like, maybe if the county would like to enter into that, but I think we ought to, and Commissioner Davis may be able to help here. I would like to contact the hospital to see who that should be sent to, because we are a regional hospital, and we could reach as far as Russell County, Republic County, some of those. So before I would send it out, I would like input from the hospital, and I would also encourage them to enter into that letter with us if they were willing to.
And Mayor, could we expand beyond the governmental bodies and include chambers or business representative organizations in those contiguous counties? And then I think our service area goes farther north in the counties that actually touch us.
And I didn't want to get it too convoluted in the fact that I'd like to get it out the sooner, the sooner the better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And also just keep in mind that we are a member of the North Central Regional Planning Commission. So it might be a good idea to take a look at those member communities and counties and make sure that they're included in the distribution.
Because I can tell you from experience that I was at Sam's the other night, and there was only a couple people without a mask on, and I just had a feeling that one couple was not from Salina County. So I bird dogged them and I followed them to their vehicle, and I was correct. They were from out of county. So again, they're not used to doing it in their county, and it's bringing it to our county. So I just think that.
But Mike, if from a timing standpoint that's acceptable to you, rather than, we could certainly have those communications with the county and the hospital and expand that communication level and report back to you next Monday. I would caution you that with Thanksgiving, Thursday and Friday being a holiday, that leaves us a pretty short turnaround time. But I guess the comments I provided you were on the assumption that you wanted action to be authorized today and be carried out immediately. But if you're willing to give us a little time to coordinate with other agencies, we can certainly do that.
And Commissioner Davis, there is an entity known as the Sunflower Coalition, which is loosely the hospitals in this geographical area that tend to, or from our perspective, send patients to us. But the North Central Kansas Planning Coalition and the Sunflower Coalition would encompass the counties from which we get most of our inpatients and outpatients, because it's, again, these are the counties that shop here in Salina. So we don't want just sick people. We want folks who are coming into places like Sam's or the grocery store.
Do we need a motion would you like a motion, Mr. Scragg, to move forward on this?
Yeah, I'd certainly entertain it if your direction is to report back to you. It would just be helpful to clarify whether you want to proceed following today's meeting or whether you are tasking us with some homework to report back to you next Monday.
Commissioner Davis, I would
We don't
certainly
have a
like to
meeting?
have a letter drafted, ready to go next Monday. I don't know if it's practical. We would, if you would draft the letter before it would go out, we would have, I'm assuming you would want us to sign it from your earlier comments?
Yeah, I think it carries with it more weight in terms of being persuasive and what I think you're trying to accomplish.
Are we having a meeting next Monday?
No.
Oh, that is the fifth
Maybe
Monday.
we ought to put it on a faster timeline.
Yeah. Yes, that would actually, our regular schedule would be December 7th.
I would prefer, and maybe we just do it alone and could get maybe we could actually get the counties that we need to address it. Maybe the hospital could help us do that, but I would like to get something sent out and so it could be available for the different counties, the commissions that meet next week, hopefully.
I would agree with that.
So
I would as well.
Could I get a motion to do such?
Yeah, city manager, feel free to change the wording on this, but I would move that we direct the city manager to draft a letter to our neighboring counties, stressing the importance of mask mandates and other public health issues that might limit the spread of coronavirus, to reduce the limit of the strain on our hospital capacity here.
I could suggest two possible amendments. If you want to talk about the Sunflower Coalition or that group of counties, rather than adjoining, we are neighboring, we might want to say regional or counties within the region.
Thank
you. If you want to invite the Salina County and the hospital to join you in endorsing that communication.
Two very wonderful amendments. Thank you.
If you
May I make one other suggestion for an amendment, is that if they feel somewhat overwhelmed and coming up with their own health directives or ordinances, perhaps we could include a copy of both the Salina County Health Department's recommendation and as well as a copy of our own ordinance to kind of demonstrate what we're looking for, or what we thought was good policy to try to get this more under control.
I like that.
And I don't know, maybe that's too much.
I can certainly draft it to reference the fact that we've done that and see attached.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so second.
We have a second with the motion and the three amendments. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passed. Okay, thank you, everyone. That will move us to 7.3.
Item 7.3, Salina Fieldhouse scheduling reconsideration.
Mr. Scragg.
Once again, that's me, Mike Scragg, City Manager here. This is the third action item that you took last Monday related to COVID. As I believe you all know, we vacillated back and forth in terms of operation and opening of the field house. Started with COVID financial issues and budget planning and staffing. Then you tasked staff with looking at what services were available and what we might be able to offer in the way of programming at the field house to try to open it back up. And then most recently, you raised the issue of asking the county to consider additional measures to respond to our COVID numbers. And so I have to admit, we were producing staff reports as in advance of the county commission meeting, taking up the health order on mass gatherings. And I have to admit that I drafted this on the premise that the field house will be subject to a mass gathering limitation that would probably render it pretty impractical to try to operate the field house at a 15 mass gathering level or some number along those lines. There were some exceptions provided for in the county's mass gathering health order, one of those being commercial gyms. And so while we're not exactly a commercial gym, there's also an exception provided for related to arenas and event spaces. That might be a little bit of a stretch to interpret the field house as a arena or event space, but nonetheless, I think we could pursue that if that's something that you as a governing body want. But having said that, I think the core, I would suggest to you that the primary decision point is health oriented first. I mean, you've expressed concern about health, spread, restriction of activities in the community. It could easily be said that what we decide about the field house is an opportunity to lead by example, or will be looked to as an example. So I would suggest to you as a governing body, you probably need to deliberate on where you stand from a health perspective first. If you're inclined to reopen the field house, then I would suggest to you that you give us some numeric guidance or some overall guidance in terms of programming. And we've bogged down in high school youth basketball, high school basketball, pickleball. I don't think that's a productive conversation at your level. If you can provide some overarching expectations, staff can carry that out. The approach that the county's health order has taken in some respects is a percentage of overall capacity. You could certainly take that approach. So I'm kind of modifying what the staff report previously reported and suggesting that, number one, I think you had to deliberate on whether it should be open or not at all as it relates to your ongoing deliberations about community health and active cases and hospitalizations and deaths. If you get past that decision point and say that you want to consider it to be open, then I think you move on to a discussion about at what level. That could be a numeric limit similar to your own self-imposed mass gathering limitation. It could be a percentage limit of capacity. If that is of any significance at all, then I think it creates some very practical considerations about our ability to program the space, make use of it in a practical way that accommodates youth tournaments from including regional teams and just the effectiveness of us trying to staff that through. So from a fiscal standpoint, we've talked previously as part of our budget conversations about cost of operation and break-even point. There's not an expectation that the field house is going to break even separate and distinct from COVID. And, we've talked about these numbers before. I don't think they're overly significant in terms of impacting your decision here. I think your focus is more from a health and safety standpoint than a financial standpoint. With that, I would pause and be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
With the
Mr. Trigg?
With the commission, I'm going to do something I usually don't do. I usually like to allow the commissioners to kind of have their input before I say anything, but maybe if you don't mind, could I lead this one? Would you be okay with that?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
If not, I'm going to do it anyway, Commissioner. Right? There's nobody that's a bigger supporter of the field house than myself. It's a facility I wish we'd had when I was growing up and my kids were growing up. I'm excited about what it's going to bring for my grandchildren. I was kind of trying to follow what Kansas High School Athletic Association was doing as far as allowing people into their facilities. And you may have seen now that there's no out of county visitors allowed to come to games in Saline County now. I thought about it as an economic generator for the downtown area. And if we sit here and we talk about allowing tournaments to happen and allowing 2 coaches and a parent for each person or whatever, I'm not sure what economic impact that's actually going to have on our community. I think because of the situation we're in, I guess I'm willing to be the bad guy and just suggest that we lead by example and probably just close the field house right now and monitor the situation as to when we can open it up, whether it's to just local usage or bringing tournaments back in. But I just think it's probably a little irresponsible right now of us to open up the field house.
Commissioner Davis, CASA meets tomorrow, special meeting to consider extending their no contact dates. I don't know whether they're going to pass it or not, but they've realized the importance in considering, despite the promise that they were going to start in December, they need to kick some things back to January, some back to February. And if the schools are certainly taking that lead, it would appear as though we might be circumventing that if we had a venue where the same contact that the schools are prohibiting, we were providing. So in that regard, I think your comments are quite appropriate.
I think your comments are appropriate as well. My question was going to be where the schools stand on the allowance of attendance at their events, and that they are in the lead on that. And then I am aware that the Kansas State Athletic Association is going to meet and make that decision you referred to, Dr. Davis. So I guess not knowing what their policy is right now, I mean, I was going to suggest that we follow that policy with the field house and move forward from that. But if it seems to be the consensus that we close, then I can be okay with that as well. We seem to be moving in that direction.
And it doesn't mean we can't open it up in this, Mayor Hoppick here. It doesn't mean we can't open it up in January, obviously, if things get better.
Right.
Well, I will weigh in and say my position hasn't changed since I voted against expanding the field house activities, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I just think it would be not a very good example of leadership if we were to open it at this point.
Commissioner Hodges, I agree with all of you.
Do we have a motion? Oh, is there any public comment? I'm sorry. Deputy City Manager Wood, is there anybody out there with their hand raised?
I don't see any at this time.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission for action then.
Mayor Hoppick, I move that we close the field house and instruct staff to return this item for reconsideration when noticeable improvement is seen in community COVID-19 numbers, such as active cases, hospitalizations, and deaths.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the field house until such time as it's safe to reopen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Let's hope that it's open sooner than later. So thank you, everyone. Okay, that will lead us to item 7.4.
Item 7.4 4, resolution number 20-7899, addressing the policy of the city of Salina, Kansas regarding participation in the law enforcement support office 1033 military surplus program.
Okay, do we have Chief Nelson online?
You do. Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
I am Chief Nelson. Good afternoon, Mayor Hoppick and fellow commissioners. This resolution will allow us to continue to participate in the federal government's law enforcement support office 1033 military surplus program as long as we have prior commission approval. I provided the history of our involvement in this program, which began in 1991. I also provided a complete inventory of the items that we have procured and since returned. Presently, the only item we have from our LESO participation in the LESO 1033 program is our Puma armored personnel carrier. We acquired that in, I believe, 2011. As I have said on several occasions, I would not recommend completely removing ourselves from this program because there stands to be significant savings, specifically regarding future needs for our SWAT team. Our present APC is over 14 years old and will have to be replaced in the near future. As such, there is no fiscal expense to the city at this time. There would be a fiscal expense in the future for transportation or shipping fees for any surplus military equipment that we are allowed to obtain in the future. As found in the blue sheet, staff believes that this will result in better transparency, oversight, and accountability. Staff has identified the following options for the city commissioners' consideration. Number 1, approve resolution number 7820-7899. Number 2, approve resolution number 20-7899 with amendments as the city commission deems appropriate. Number 3, postpone consideration of resolution number 20-7899 to a specified date and time, and provide staff direction regarding additional information or amendment to the city commission would like to request for their further consideration. And finally, number 4, vote to deny resolution number 20-7899, resulting in the police department's participation in the LESO 1033, not requiring prior commission approval unless the items to be procured are more than $20,000. Staff recommends option number 1, and I would certainly be happy to entertain any questions at this time.
And just this is Mike Craig. Just as a quick clarification with the purchasing policy amendment that you made last week, that 20,000 threshold would go to 30,000 effective January 1.
Questions or comments from the commission? Okay, are there any participants, Mr. Wood, that would like to weigh in?
We don't have any at this time.
Okay, this is an item we have discussed several times. I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor,
Mr.
move
Mayor?
we. Go ahead.
Right ahead, Doctor.
Okay. Okay. All right. Move we approve resolution 20-7899.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 20-7899. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you. Thank you, Chief Nelson, for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, that will lead us to item 7.5.
Item 7.5, resolution number 20-7907, authorizing the mayor to execute change order number 1 to the original agreement with professional services with PESA Consulting Services for phase 3 of the countywide 800 megahertz radio system.
Okay, is Mr. Pruitt online?
I can see him, but it looks like he's muted.
Looks like we still have Brad Nelson on there too.
Yeah,
Wait, Mr. Pruitt?
he shows up as Forrest P. But there we go. Looks like he's unmuted now.
Wayne Pruitt, here to report on this. In 2017, the City and County 911 Advisory Board started discussion of how to upgrade our radio and what steps it was going to take to get this done. It was decided then that we needed to look for a professional consulting service, and we put out bids for that. And out of that bidding process, we came up with TUSA Consulting Services. And in November 17 of 2017, we signed an agreement with TUSA to utilize 911 funds for the to assist us through the process for new radio system. Since that time, we have gone through 2 phases of the request for proposal for radio service. And as you well know, we are at the point now to where contracts were signed with Motorola for this. And then we came into phase 3. And in phase 3, Hannah Stanball and I discussed at length, do we have the expertise to be project managers to see this through, to ensure that everything is done correctly and that we don't shortchange ourselves. And we spoke with the 911 advisory group, and we discussed, how much expertise do we have and do we need additional expertise? And we reached out and determined that we needed more than what TUSA was giving us in the current phase 3. And so we asked Alan Talkington with TUSA, what else can you do for us? And he came up with additional turnkey proposals that would be additional hours on top of the current situation that we're now. And he came up with $85,825 on that, which equates out to an additional 600 hours to assist us through this entire project. This is an 18-month project from the time we sign that contract till the time we go live. Now, the question is, are they out trying to get more money out of us? No, we're just trying to ensure that we do it right. We got one chance to do this right, and we need this expertise that is basically going to handle all these operations or guide us through this, so we end up with a product that we don't have to look back and say, we didn't manage that project very well. So what we're asking for is an adoption of the resolution authorizing an addendum to the original contract for services for TUSA in the phase 3 for an additional $85,825. Keep in mind, if we don't use all those hours, we don't get billed. If we use more than 600 hours, they're not going to charge us additional. That is the max amount, but they will continue to be our project manager and assist us with this. So our recommended action is adopt this resolution authorizing the additional $85,825, or you can postpone consideration and give us a date and time to provide staff direction regarding additional information, or you can deny the resolution. We recommend option 1 on this. Any questions?
Commissioners, Mike Scragg here. The staff report explains that that original contract with TUSA had more of what's called a milestone approach to phase 3, where there would be some involvement, but as Mr. Pruitt explained, a lot of that burden would be on city and county staff. And as we got into the Motorola contract and those details, there's a recognition that TUSA had the expertise to actually do site inspections and inspect, the installation work. I think there was also a recognition as we went into this project about the need for site acquisition that may have changed over time, and TUSA can provide assistance there as well. And then I do believe Hannah Stanbaugh is is online as well, and would like to give her the opportunity to at least acknowledge that she's here and participating, and give her the opportunity to comment if she'd like.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity, Mike. I think probably the biggest thing with this is when we got into the contract negotiation piece, both Wayne and I sat down and realized that several staff roles had changed, obviously mine in particular, and the level of detail that was needed and the level of staff time that was needed to completely dedicate to this project was quite a bit more than what we had originally expected. So I do appreciate the involvement of TUSA from the very get-go. They are a huge advocate for both the city and the county to see this project through and make sure that it is successful. So this particular amendment to their contract would certainly help us with better project management, as well as just the level of expertise that they bring to this extremely technical and complicated project.
And Hannah, just for everyone's benefit, the total value of this project is
just short of about $15 million if we count both the city and the county's contributions for the contract itself.
Questions, comments from the commission?
Commissioner Davis, at that last joint city-county meeting we had, and the question may not have been asked specifically, are you going to be our owner's rep or project manager throughout, but I got the distinct impression the implied answer to that was, yes, we'd be here with you and see you all the way through. Are these additional services in phase 3 something that we truly had not, or did we expect that the consultant would have done that as part of seeing the job through, or are these things that we didn't realize would have to be done? Because there were questions, I think, regarding did we need to have an owner's rep, to monitor the project for us.
right. This is Mike Scragg. I'll take a first pass at that, and then Mr. Pruitt and Ms. Tambaugh can probably speak in greater detail. But at the time that question was raised and answered, we had an agreement in place with TUSA for phase 3 services. So it would have been accurate for them to say that, we're under contract and we'll provide you services. This is really a recognition that there's a need for a higher level of service than was originally contracted. And so rather than kind of spot checking installations, there's more of a commitment on TUSA's part to conduct inspections and have them be the experts in the field rather than relying on staff. As we've gotten through the Motorola bid, looked at the level of detail in terms of the system that's being installed, and had a recognition that we need more out of TUSA than we might have originally contracted.
So were these not services that we would have thought needed to have been provided for ahead of time?
Yeah, I'll defer to Mr. Pruitt and Ms. Stambaugh about those preliminary conversations that took place.
So if you go back and you look at 2017, that's 3 years ago, and we look at this and say, this sounds like a great idea. The milestone proposal sounds like a great idea. And then here we are 3 years later, and then we start figuring out this thing is huge. There's so many things, so many moving parts that we have to be involved in. Example, fleet mapping. We've had countless fleet mapping meetings, and thankfully Alan has been there to assist us through this fleet mapping. Motorola's been there through this, but we have countless hours. We're close to having it done, but we're still not even close. We don't even have the fleet mapping done, and that's just a little bit of this. And when you start talking about site acquisition and all the other things that have to occur in those, it's just overwhelming. I spent an hour on the phone the other day just trying to do a meeting with them on all the asset management. after an hour of talking to the guy on asset management, I called Alan. I said, "Are you going to help me with this? Because they're over my head." And he knows, he understands all this stuff. And these are the kinds of things that we're going to be relying on these people. They're going to be a one-stop call every time that we have an issue. And it's not going to be my issue. It's not going to be Hannah's issue. It's a city and a county issue. And I just can't say we can't have them enough here to help us.
Right. The amount of money, you know, considering the size of the project, isn't my concern. It just, you know, I would rather this complete scope of services have just been rolled in. It just seems some of this stuff would have been items that we knew had to occur, you know, when we were comparing the different projects, you know, different site acquisitions and equipment and inspections and stuff. It's not the amount of money. It just seems like, oh, now that you bought it, you need to hire us to teach you how to drive it. Kind of should have known we didn't know how to drive it before we bought it.
Yeah, this is Mike Sprague.
It's not the
again.
amount of money that's bothering me.
If it's helpful, two things in that regard. I think some of the site acquisition aspect of it resulted as the system was designed and we knew more about deployment. I think there was an initial expectation that we could locate on existing sites that the city and the county might have. And then when we got into coverage mapping and those type of things, it expanded into the need for site acquisition beyond that. And then I've personally taken the original scope of services for phase 3 and done a side-by-side comparison with the proposed scope of services, comparing that milestone approach to the turnkey approach for the purpose of just ensuring that this is added service at added cost. And, you know, while there may have been a task in the original milestone approach, the level of service and the 600 hours that Mr. Pruitt described is the basis of kind of feeling that $85,000 of expense is justified.
And does the county pay for any of this? And I couldn't find in the report unless I read it and didn't see it. Is this all in the city or does the county share in this?
Well, this actually is a standalone E911 fund that is the city manages financially. And Mr. Pruitt mentioned the E911 committee. We have a provision about the membership of that committee, and it has its own fund balance that there's funds that come from the phone bill that the state distributes to us. So we analyzed existing fund balance, ongoing annual expenditures, and then forecast this additional expenditure and what it might do to that fund balance. And there's sufficient funds, not only right now, but accounting for future expenditures to pay this expense. So
is that fund is it a city fund? Is that technically then a city fund, a state fund, a city county fund, or?
I guess you'd say it's a city fund in that we administer it and we maintain the accounting for it. It is subject to the eligible uses of E911 funds that are specified by state statute.
So the commissioner, what it is every public safety answering point, PSAP, receives funds through cell phone services and landline services. So the state is set at 90 cents right now, but you have on top of that, the Kansas 911 coordinating council gets 23 cents off that 90 cents to begin with. And then based upon the size of your county, it depends on, you get 100%, and then it drops down to 90%, 80%. Counties under 50,000, I believe they're right at getting 100% of 90 to 95%. And the reason that the city of Salina receives this and not the county is we are the public safety answering point for the county, the city of Salina.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions from commissioners?
You know, I'd note, I looked at some of the history on this, and this contract was originally authorized on January 22nd of 2018. And of course, my question was at that time, how much did we know about the contract? And in fact, the request for commission action on that contract makes no reference to either phase 2 or phase 3 services that were included in the contract. And the only reference I could find in the minutes to implementation was City Manager Gage at that time stated that the final phase was implementation, and TUSA would assist the city of Salina with implementation of the system. So at that point, either the staff, certainly not the commission, knew anything at all about that level of service. You know, what I have to question or wonder about is if TUSA representatives, when they were discussing this with staff before this most recent recommendation to go with this system, and actually before the staff recommendation to retain TUSA, did they disclose the difference between the two approaches? Because and what implications that might carry for the city of Salina. I mean, did they tell us that their experience was that many communities could not do this?
Mike Sprague here. I was not involved in those conversations. I can't speak to that specifically. As I mentioned, the agreement that actually was executed at the date that you referenced, Commissioner Franz, is on file. That's what I reviewed. And so there's a little bit more detail in the scope of services in that agreement than the statement that you read after.
There is. Matter of fact, it corresponds very closely to the new scope of services in the new agreement. There's very little difference. The one difference is acquisition of property. That is not referenced in the original agreement, but they call out site visits, they call out inspections, you know, all of that stuff. Now it's, you know, it's in more detail in this new proposal, but it's essentially the same stuff.
Yeah, and
I look at it.
I don't have it in front of me, but I did that same analysis, and there were about 4 or 5 items that I felt like were unique to the turnkey approach compared to the scope of services in the original agreement. And that's why I had the conversation with staff about you know, those added 600 hours and where the value is coming from. But
you know, the bottom line for me is I kind of agree with Commissioner Davis in that you know, it's pretty clear that TUSA understands. Matter of fact, they say so at the beginning of this proposal that I believe it says clients often don't have the resources or personnel to support a project of this size, and others are surprised that it becomes a second full-time job. I'm not surprised by that given the nature and the magnitude of this project. What is the burr under my saddle is that TUSA clearly has foreknowledge of this as an issue, and they never disclosed it. You know, in my head, when I first read this thing, the term bait and switch came to mind. Let's get them on the hook, you know, sell them a car that doesn't have a drivetrain, and then we'll sell them the drivetrain later. And that's what's irritating, and it happens with some frequency. You know, I've seen it happen before, and it's extremely irritating.
So you can sit there and you can say this is a burden yourself. I can agree with you, but I can sit here and look at Riley County, who went with not using TUSA as their sole person, and they had their own people involved. But the people that they had involved have vastly much more radio experience than I have. And I just don't have the expertise. I don't think Hannah has the expertise. I don't think there's anybody on city staff or county staff that has all the expertise that we need to get this right the first time. We only got one shot at this. I'm not afraid to ask for that money to do that.
And Mr. Pruitt, I think if I'm hearing the other two correctly, and I'm kind of with them, I don't think we're really blaming you or Hannah for this. I think we're just a little taken back that and I've dealt with this and on some things before, and that they're the experts, and the money is not the hang up as far as I think, like Commissioner Davis said. It's just the fact that if they would have come to us up front and said, hey, you guys don't have this ability, this is some additional services that you're going to need. You know, when we were meeting with the county and making this decision on a month and a half ago, I think we all would have been okay with that, because we don't expect you guys to have that expertise. So we're not really, at least myself, I'm not pointing fingers at you and Hannah. I'm just a little frustrated with TUSA, and this happens all the time. I mean, I've seen it in other instances where I've been involved in stuff like this. So, but I don't think have any choice unless we want to take a chance on this not being as successful as we want it to be. But anyway, it is what it is, I guess. So, Commissioner Ryan or Hodges, did you have any comments or questions?
Commissioner Hodges here. There's just one question that I need to have answered, because when I look at some pretty complex projects like we've had in the past, like the field house, for example, my question is, when we go to implement this and we get online or whatever, if something's not right, if we find out that, our coverage isn't what it needs to be, or it's not interfacing properly, is TUSA going to be, as I'm assuming, really the project manager? They're responsible for all oversight. It's not going to be Mr. Pruitt. It's not going to be Ms. Stanbaugh. It's not the E911 committee. It's TUSA. So like with the field house, when you have the concrete batches that maybe weren't poured correctly, or the underlayment, there was kind of a lot of, this going along. Well, where are the monthly construction reports? Where's this? Where's that? I'm assuming, and I'd like to hear that from you all, that if we go ahead with this agreement, that's all on TUSA. If there's something that's not done up to standard, that's on TUSA. That's their responsibility?
Yes, ma'am. That's how we expect this to be, that they are going to take the lead on this entire project, but they're going to come to us and say, this is what we're finding. How do you want us to proceed?
And I need to weigh in there. That is definitely the expectation, much like development services building inspections, whether it's us doing the inspections or whether it's TUSA doing the inspections. I don't know that we're in a position where they're fully responsible for all failures. Depending on the details of the issue, we may still find ourselves having to sort out the root cause of the problem and the responsibility and where it lies.
Commissioner Davis,
failures of oversight. I mean, we're paying which I agree. I don't think that Mr. Pruitt or Ms. Stanbaugh needs to add, supervising this project to their list of responsibilities. But with this kind of investment, I think has to come some responsibility. So if there is a failure, that we have to know that TUSA is going to stand behind their oversight of this project.
Would the relationship be different if they were hired officially as a project manager instead of the consultant?
Well, I guess the clarification I would offer is this does not compensate them for full-time inspection for the entire project on all sites. It is more inspection. It's more of a commitment on their part, but it is not a full commitment. And so just the nature of inspecting and observing a project, whether it's TUSA or anyone else, a owner's representative or a city inspector, they are spot inspections. And so there's a role to be played by the inspector, but it doesn't leave them fully responsible for all failures on a project.
Commissioner Davis, so then right now, who is responsible for those type failures? And is
the contractor?
All right, and
Commissioner Hodges, who's responsible for catching those failures? I mean, our staff.
Are we talking specific to this project or more?
Yeah, no. I mean, because I guess probably and I think Commissioner Davis, just alluded to it in terms of a project manager versus a consultant, whatever. I guess maybe, so they're not like a construction manager at risk. So if it turns out that the towers weren't installed correctly or they weren't installed at the correct location.
Right.
It's just like, whoops.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just like, so what would TUSA's role be in that?
When the construction manager at risk format, the construction manager is the general contractor. So
Right.
They are the ones that we enter into a contract to perform the work. That TUSA is not in that role in either
Right.
scenario.
I understand that.
So they're more in an inspection role. If we don't go forward with this proposed change order, that leaves more of that responsibility that you're asking about on staff. This proposed change order agrees upon a heightened level of involvement on the part of TUSA, and the expectation is they're going to observe and they're going to represent us. Number one, to avoid problems. Number two, to identify and resolve the problems. But whether it's this project in TUSA or whether it's another project where we hire inspection services, I don't know that a contract gets us makes an inspector fully responsible for all failures because they are not on the job site 100% of the time. They are doing spot inspections on our behalf.
Well, I'm just glad that the staff has brought this to us at this point because I think every large project has its complexities, and the oversight always seems to be difficult. At least they've realized it, and we're establishing a protocol to address it at this point. We're not at the tail end or halfway through the project.
Well, Commissioner David, when I look at the additional proposed services, they're all very reasonable services, but they're also services that I would have expected to have been in the original contract, even if it cost more. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around these being an afterthought. And again, I agree with the other commissioners, has nothing to do with our staff.
No.
If somebody wants to build me a new X-ray machine, I don't have the expertise to oversee its installation. I would know nothing about that. And you guys know something about this, but it's I would rather have just seen this up front, not after the fact, after we probably already started digging holes for towers. By the way, you're gonna need this. And they're all very reasonable services. I just don't know why they're not part of their standard contract.
Not having been involved in the contract negotiation on the front end, I'm forced to speculate, but I do think at that time, our focus was on consulting services for system design, preparing the RFPs, assisting us with selection of the vendor. And we very well could have been guilty of focusing our attention there and saying, we'll sort out the scope of phase 3 if we ever get to awarding a contract. I don't know.
Now that explanation is the most reasonable one I've heard so far. I appreciate that.
I have to acknowledge that's purely speculation on my part, but
I would say that looking at the blue sheet in the minutes or the request for commission action in the minutes, that is probably an accurate observation because it was entirely focused on that first phase, and at that point, of course, we didn't know where this was going. I would also like to say that I have been involved in a number of, let's just call them technical project implementations, and some have gone better than others. Let me put it that way. And a large part of the difference is having the expertise from the private sector, from people who work with it all the time. So I get what Mr. Pruitt and Ms. Stanbaugh are saying is, you can't be an expert in all things, and this is pretty specific. So I'm going to say, on the whole, I'm inclined to support this extension. I'm just not very happy about it. I just don't like being in this position, and I've dealt with software vendors who do the same sorts of things, and that before you sign the contract, we'll be there every day helping you, and after the contract's in place, it's talk to my message machine for 3 days. I just don't like the way the system works, but I recognize that if this thing's going to work, we need to have the expertise to implement it.
Do we have any, Mr. Wood, do we have any buddy out there on that would like to comment on this? Do we have any participants?
I'm not seeing any.
So, okay, although none of us are thrilled about it, I guess I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Well, thanks to city manager's explanation and wisdom. I'll move we adopt resolution 20-7907, authorizing an addendum to the original contract for professional services from TUSA for phase 3 of the contract at an increase of $85,825.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 20-7907. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, that will lead us to item 7.6.
Item 7.6, resolution number 20-7897, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the Axon Enterprises Inc. for the sole source purchase of 22 new Axon Fleet 2 in-car video cameras, 3 interview camera systems, software licensing, storage, and ancillary equipment.
Is Deputy Chief Morton with us?
I am. Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm coming before you this evening with a request to enter into an agreement with Axon Enterprise for the purchase of 22 in-car video camera systems and 3 interview room systems. The proposal is for hardware, licensing, software, installation, and storage. These systems would be paid for interest-free over a period of 5 years. Axon Enterprise has been the police department supplier of body cameras and storage since 2013. Axon also is the patent holder for Taser and has supplied the police department with these devices since early 2000. The Salina Police Department officers are expected to record almost every contact with the public. These recordings are used for evidence in court, post-operational incident review, and in the investigation of citizen complaints. The number of digital evidence files managed by the police department is ever growing. Therefore, the police department has been working towards centralizing the storage and management of these files. Currently, the police department's evidence unit handles about 100 digital evidence requests a month. That's just one request, and that request oftentimes involves multiple videos, photographs, or audio recordings. One item that I will point out at this particular point is in the staff report, it was noted that we had 20.8 gigabyte of digital evidence storage, which is about thumb drive size, which is not right. That's supposed to be represented as terabyte worth of videos. As noted in the staff report, the police department's current in-car video system is outdated, failing, does not interface with our body cameras. Several marked police units do not currently have working in-car video systems. This is very worrisome to the police department administration. The police department currently has an interview room system which is newer, but once again, it does not interface with the body-worn cameras or storage that we are currently using from Axon. In addition, the process of exporting these videos and uploading them to Axon storage site is very inefficient. As listed in the staff report, there are a great number of advantages to both the in-car and interview room camera system. Besides compatibility, one of the main advantages of the in-car system is that the system is once it's activated, it sends out a radio signal that will activate Axon body cameras within 30 feet for a period of 30 seconds. So for example, if you had an officer that stopped a vehicle by turning on its emergency lights, and as soon as the vehicle pulled over, the driver was to exit and start firing at the patrol vehicle, the officer wouldn't have to worry about activating their body camera, as by activating their in-car emergency lights, that camera would already be activated, and therefore they would be able to concentrate on the task at hand and dealing with the incoming gunfire. Both systems allow for touchless storage, which saves staff time, and there is unlimited data storage, and there's audit trails with each item of evidence. As mentioned in the staff report, there are other hardware devices in Axon Enterprise's electronic ecosystem that are designed to work and interface with systems already purchased by the police department. Anticipating the need to centralize digital evidence and upgrade our current hardware, the police department has included $41,000 in both the 2020 and 2021 operating budgets. Axon has provided a quote for both systems at a total cost of $163,139.90. As with other Axon agreements with the city, the police department has requested that the total cost be divided up over a period of 5 years. The annual breakdown is listed in the staff report. The police department has provided several options in the staff report for the commission's consideration. With that said, the police department recommends option 1. And I will take any questions that you may have for us.
I presume Axon has quite a number of installations, and this is pretty well tested technology.
Yeah, we're not completely contracting with them to do the complete installation of our vehicles. They're going to send a team of 1 or 2 people out to work with our vendor locally to do the installations of those. This is a lot more technical than what we've used previously, in that the videos are going to be uploaded via LTE and therefore have to touch portions of our network in that process. We've tested it at least 2 or 3 different times, most recently being in in July and August of this year.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Hodges here. So if I understand you correctly, like once we have the Axon in-car units, whenever the emergency lights are deployed, the camera starts automatically?
That's correct. So the in-car camera would of course be turned on the same way it is now, but Axon system also sends out a signal which would activate any of our body cameras, Axon body cameras, that are within 30 feet for a period of 30 seconds. So in those times that are very tense and uncertain, that kind of takes some of the, remembering to do that when your concentration is somewhere else.
Gotcha. I didn't understand if you were talking. Okay, I understand now. And then my follow-up question to that would be, at this point, just, on a normal routine, daily basis, a routine stop, which I guess there's probably no routine stop, but acknowledging that, when do we typically turn on our body cameras?
Normally they'll turn them on before they're getting out of the car, before they make the stop. But that time at the very beginning of the stop, there's a lot of things going on.
Absolutely.
Meaning you have to drive the car, you have to talk on the radio, you're potentially getting feedback from the computer in the car, because communications has put the information in, and that information is then showing up on your computer. So this takes part of that would take part of that away. And not only in the activation of the lights, but it's also mentioned in the staff report that there are other things that can activate the lights, and hence the on-officer video camera, and that being if there's a crash, a speed can be set. So if you set a speed of 60 miles an hour, for instance, that it would also activate the camera and therefore send out that signal. If you had it connected to the locking mechanisms in the car for the shotgun and rifle, it can be set up to where if a button is pressed to unlock those weapons, that it would also activate the cameras that are in the area as well.
Craig here, Deputy Chief.
It's like a phenomenal use of technology. And I was particularly excited to see about the signal sidearm and the Taser 7 that you mentioned. And so if all of that's compatible with the Axon systems that we will have in place, you know, should we move forward with this, what would be the timeline for getting everything so that it was connected and working seamlessly with, say, the signal sidearm and the Taser 7? Do you have any sense on what kind of an investment or what kind of a timeline that would look like?
You know, a lot of that, as you mentioned, comes down to finances, and we've had some discussions, of course, with both the city manager and the deputy city manager. And I'm actually working through some things right now because there was some room in the quote and in the annual payments going forward compared to what was budgeted, that making some room there, and then making also a room on a current obligation that we have with payments on a Taser, that we may be getting closer to having the majority of that annual cost for the upgrade of the Tasers, getting close to making that so it's close to a zero budget increase. Not making promises, but that's something that I've been working towards. The signal sidearm, they're $249 a piece. So of course, times 80 officers. So basically coming down to finances is
Right.
what we're working through right now.
I appreciate you bringing this to us, and I just feel like it's a win-win for both the LEOs to, you know, help them, you know, not have to focus on one more thing, and also for citizens too. So I think this is a great start. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Scragg here, if I may. Just as a couple of clarifications, Deputy Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the functionality, and I'm very impressed with Axon's technology and functionality and how they continue to evolve and adapt. But one of the functionalities is when lights are activated, it actually backs up in a block of time and record. It's running all the time and recording over itself. When lights are activated, it then is able to actually save part of that recording that led up to the activation of the lights to help record the basis of the car stop?
That is true. There's different time frames that you can set that for. Our current in-car video system does that as well. Most of them do. I believe the increments that can be set in is 30 seconds, a minute, and 90 seconds before the actual activation of pre-event buffering is what they call it. There's no audio in that, but there is visual. The on-officer cameras are the same way. They're buffering for a 30-second prior to the activation of the camera. So that is a feature that we have on the body cameras as well.
So this technology just adds to transparency and accountability on both sides, you know, accountability to the officers, but also getting a record of the interaction with the public. And I've been surprised with everything that's gone on with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter recently, the number of agencies our size and larger that don't have this technology and the position they find themselves in. The other point I was going to make is, and part of that conversation about the sidearm technology is the useful life of our tasers. We're kind of in the middle of that cycle. And so we've had conversations about when that useful life is going to be up and when they'll be replaced, and being able to factor that in at that point.
Okay, any other questions? That's the deputy city manager. Is there anyone, any participants out there?
Yeah, there are no hands raised.
Okay. Not, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor Hoppick, I move that we approve resolution number 20-7897, authorizing the mayor to enter into a 5-year agreement with Axon Enterprises Incorporated, authorizing the purchase of 22 new Axon Fleet 2 in-car video cameras, 3 interview room camera systems, software licensing, storage, and ancillary equipment for a total of $163,139.90. And to authorize a payment not to exceed $9,680 to KCOM Incorporated for removal of the current in-car video systems and to install the new video camera systems.
Second.
We got a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 20-7897. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Morton, for your time. Okay, that will lead us to, do we have any commissioners that need a break, or are we ready to keep on moving?
Keep on.
All right.
Roll on.
Oh, come on, Commissioner Davis. If you need a 5-minute break, let's do it. Let's do it.
Well, let's just put it within the next hour, I will need a 5-minute break.
An hour-long one, huh?
You're right. I don't need it this hot second, but I'll send a text to the deputy manager when time is getting close.
Okay. We appreciate the warning. Okay, that'll move us to item 7.7.
Item 7.7, resolution number 20-7903, declaring all areas between Kenwood Park Drive and Kenwood Park to be considered as a qualified facility under the City of Salina Municipal Facilities Naming Guidelines.
We have Mr. Cotton on the line.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor, members of the commission. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Hopefully this is more fun than some other stuff on the agenda. Jacob, can you pull up the first picture, please? So this is on what we're going to be discussing this evening. This is a picture of the former swimming pool on opening on the opening month when the pool was built in May of 1956. Could you go to the next slide, Jacob? This is the area that we'll be discussing, Kenwood Park Drive and Midway Drive. And then could you go to the last picture? And then this is the vision of Salina Net Generation. As mentioned, this is a resolution to declare all areas between Kenwood Park Drive and Midway Drive to be considered as a qualified facility for naming purposes. At this time, there is no name to bring forward. However, the City Commission will declare the area as eligible for naming rights. It will allow Salina Net Generation the opportunity to use the possibility of naming rights in their efforts to raise an estimated $2,600,000 in funding for this project. Approval of declaring the area eligible for naming rights does not in any way, shape, or form mean the approval of the proposed project. And when the Net Generation comes up with the names, that will all come back before the City Commission for their consideration. There is no cost associated with approving this facility to be declared as a qualified municipal facility. At this time, staff recommends the approval of resolution number 20-7903.
Okay, questions for Mr. Cotton?
This is Commissioner Davis. Is it the intention then to have this would be named, whatever it's going to be named, the name would then set it apart from Kenwood Park, or would this still be considered a part of Kenwood Park?
Correct, sir.
That's asking too much detail. But
no, sir. The name would not change. It would still be whatever located in Kenwood Park. Kenwood Park name would be associated with the complex.
Mr. Cotton, do we know, so we don't know if they're wanting to rename the whole complex or if they're just gonna like we did at the field house, they could name courts?
Yes, sir. If you look at the last picture, you'll notice that it's a pretty expansive facility, and they want to be able to name the courts, the bathhouse, the former bathhouse, possibly the former concession stand. So we want them to be able to, kind of like what we did with the Berkeley Family Recreational Area. We want them to be able to name anything and everything that allows them to raise funds for the project.
That is exclusive of the roadways themselves, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's only the areas within the drive. If you look at an aerial, the second slide, that whole area is kind of like its own island within the park. So basically, it just qualifies everything within those borders of Midway Drive and Kenwood Park Drive.
Any other questions? Okay, Deputy City Manager, do we have any participants that looks like want to weigh in? Did I lose the Deputy City Manager?
No, I'm here. I'm just checking it out. There have been a few people that have joined a little bit later in the meeting. I think that we're interested in this topic. So if you haven't been here in the past, if you would either send me a message or raise your hand if you'd like to speak at this time. I don't see any right now. We'll give you just a couple of seconds.
You want to
explain what it means to raise your hand? Yeah.
Okay.
They may be at home raising their hand.
Correct. Well, I could see them, so maybe. Yeah, if you'll open up the participant tag, there we go. I've got one raising their hand right now. Clark Renfro's just raised his hand. I will unmute you, Clark, and give you a chance to speak.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. So I just wanted to follow up on what Chris had presented, and our group has been active on trying to get this thing moving forward. We've raised in pledges and in donations over $1 million without having to do any naming rights, but that certainly will help us get the remaining balance or whatever it's going to take to move this project forward. But this will be a big help. And as Chris mentioned, we're not looking to take the Kenwood aspect out of it. That will remain. But we certainly want to have the opportunity with the facility and the courts and the building and whatever else that may be in those confines to allow us to raise funds privately.
Is there any questions for Mr. Renfro? I know he's been real involved in this. Do any commissioners have any questions direct to him?
No, not now.
We're going to let you off easy tonight, Mr.
All
Renfro.
right.
Okay, thank you for calling in.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Mr. Wood?
I don't see any at this time.
Okay. Okay, with that, I will bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Mayor, I move we approve resolution number 207903.
I will.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Do I have a second?
Second. Commissioner Davis.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 20-7903. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes 5-0. That will lead us to item 7.8.
Item 7.8, second reading ordinance number 20-11044, levying Salina Business Improvement District number 1 service fees for 2021.
Okay, this is second reading. I do not believe, Mr. Scragg, that we've had any comments on this.
Not that I'm aware of. I'll look to the finance director and deputy city clerk to verify whether they've had any.
No, we have not.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the commission?
None.
I will look to the deputy city manager, see if there's anyone online that would like to participate.
There are no hands raised.
Okay, with that, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Carl Ryan here. I move we approve ordinance number 211044 on second reading.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve ordinance number 20-11044 on second reading. I will ask for a roll call.
Mr. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Fran,
Aye.
Mr. Hodges,
Aye.
Mr. Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Hoppick.
Aye. That passes 5-0. That will then lead us to item 7.9.
Item 7.9, authorized publication of the notice of budget hearing for the 2020 amended budget.
Ms. Pack.
Good evening, Commissioner, Mr. Mayor, and Commissioners. State statute requires that we hold a formal public hearing anytime we set a budget. And at this time of year, we looked at all budgets to see if we are going to end within the budget constraints that we have set ourselves the previous year. So in anticipation of that, we are requesting that we set a budget hearing date of December 21st. We will publish that in the newspaper, setting that date and time so the public is aware and that they have the opportunity to come forward and make any comments they might have. At this time, with the numbers that we have passed today, it does appear that the special gas tax fund may go over its budgeted expenditure. The reason for that is during that COVID, we reassigned a lot of expenses from sales tax, not knowing what that was going to do. And as a result of that, it may affect that expenditure budget that we originally set back for 2020. After publication, these amounts may not be increased, which we'll be doing our publication next week. We have to publish 10 days prior to the December 21st hearing date. So our recommended action is that you authorize us to publish that notice of hearing for the 2020 amended budget. And if there's any other funds that we find, we will certainly be adding those to that notification at that time. I would stand for any questions.
Okay. Any comments from the commission?
None.
Should this be the 2021 amended budget?
No, it's 2020 amended budget.
This is the year-end.
Year-end deal. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
It's my understanding the driving factor on this is the fact that we got some additional monies and we decided to go ahead and move some expenditures into this fund as a result of that.
Correct.
Other questions or comments?
No.
Okay, Deputy City Manager, do we have anyone online?
We do not.
Okay. With that, I will bring it back to the commission.
Commissioner Hodges here. Mayor Hoppick, I move that we authorize publication of the notice of budget hearing for the 2020 amended budget, which sets December 21st as the date for public hearing on the 2020 amended budget and establishes the maximum limits of the 2020 amended budget.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to authorize publication of the notice of the budget hearing for the 2020 amended budget, which sets December 21st as the date for public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes 5-0. That will lead us to development business 8.1.
Item 8.1, resolution number 20-7902, authorizing the mayor to execute an amended and restated license agreement with the Lee Law Partners LLC.
Okay, do we have Mr. Andrew available?
It looks like he's there but muted.
How about that?
There we go.
Here we go.
You're golden.
Okay, I've been unmuted.
For now.
This is an amendment to an agreement that the City Commission saw just about 2 years ago in November of 2018. And at that time, you approved a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign a license agreement. And the license agreement actually at that time was left blank because we didn't know for sure the entity that would be the second party to the agreement, because at that time, the group had not purchased the Lee buildings and an entity had not been formed yet. And so in August of this year, we were able to piece together all the financing and the ownership changes and put forward the agreement for their review and execution. And the legal counsel that Lee Loss Partners had retained had requested 2 changes to that license agreement. And in reviewing those, we considered those to be substantive. So we felt like they should come back to the City Commission for your review. All the work that was contemplated under the original license agreement has been done, and it meets all the city specifications. This mostly is a procedural item, just dealing with future notice relating to termination or adjustments. And so the 2 requests, the first one relates to under the section dealing with the term of the agreement, that if there's some condition that's not being met, that rather than 10 days written notice, that they would receive 30 days written notice. So there's a 20-day increase in the notice. An example of that might be if they were negligent or failing to keep the parking stalls along Elm Street striped, and we sent them notice to get that cured. This would require that we provide them 30 days written notice instead of 10. The other change that's being requested is if there was a situation where we had a public need for use of the Elm Street or Santa Fe right-of-way that might conflict with their use. The language has been softened to allow for some negotiation and discussion about adjustments or other things that could be done short of removal of their improvements from the right-of-way. So those are the only 2 changes, other than changing the date of the agreement. And we now have someone to engage with, which is Lee Loss Partners LLC. That is the ownership group that has ownership and has completed phase 1 of the Lee buildings. Your options this evening would be to approve the attached resolution that would authorize the mayor to execute an amended and restated license agreement with Lee Loss Partners. You could postpone consideration of this request to a future meeting date if you feel additional information is needed, or you could decline to approve the proposed amendments. With that, I'd be open to any questions.
Okay, questions for Mr. Andrews?
Nope.
Okay, Mayor Hoppick here. Mr. Wood, do we have anybody?
We do not.
Okay. I see the participant numbers going down. Okay, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor Hoppick, I move we approve resolution number 20-7902.
Commissioner Hodges, second.
You have a motion and a second to approve city commission or to approve resolution number 20-7902. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Okay, that will lead us to item 8.2.
Item 8.2, consider acceptance of offered utility and drainage easement for infrastructure serving Magnolia Hills Estate, addition number 2, and acceptance of a stormwater detention pond for city ownership and maintenance. Item 8.2A, authorize the mayor to accept an off-site utility easement and 2 drainage easements on behalf of the city. Item 8.2B, resolution number 20-7905, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Magnolia Hills Inc. for the dedication and acceptance of a stormwater detention pond serving Magnolia Hills Estate, addition number 2.
Okay, Mr. Andrew, you're.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We have 2 companion items for you related to Magnolia Hills Estates addition number 2. If you'll recall, that is the property that's directly to the east of Magnolia Hills Estates, which has frontage on Markley Road. You may also recall that the original preliminary plat for this property extended all the way to Holmes Road, and it contained 48 acres and 105 residential building lots. That was scaled back to the midpoint between Markley Road and Holmes Road. And so the final plat as it stood is 19.4 acres, has 45 residential building lots. As a result of that scaled down plat, it resulted in several easements that would have been within the boundaries of the preliminary plat that were not on the final plat. So when the city commission accepted the dedications from the plat, there were several easements that were outside the boundaries. And so as the developers have completed their infrastructure in phase 1 and are approaching their ability to get their first building permits, we're just addressing all the items related to conditions of the platting. And the first one related to getting these 3 easements in place. So there's a drainage easement for a storm sewer pipeline that runs across a portion of a private lot at the corner of Ridge Hill Drive and Huntwood Drive. There's a drainage easement for a detention pond that serves this entire development and will serve any future phasing over to Holmes Road. And then there's a sewer line that runs from the east edge of this subdivision over to near Holmes Road. So the applicants have retained the services of a licensed surveyor. They prepared these instruments and the exhibits that go with them. And since they're outside the plat, they need to be dedicated and accepted separately. So your options this evening would be to accept the easements and authorize the mayor to sign the easement documents accepting the dedications on behalf of the city. You could postpone consideration, or you could decline to accept the easement dedications.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Andrew? I will ask Deputy City Manager Wood if there's anyone online that would like to comment.
There are no hands raised.
Okay, I will bring it back to the commission for action then. I have my commissioners with me.
Mayor, maybe everybody's kind of fading out. I would move we accept the offered public drainage and utility easements and authorize the mayor to sign the easement documents accepting the easement dedications on behalf of the city.
Second.
My question to staff, do we need to do those as 2 separate motions or is one motion okay?
I think
I guess one of them we're accepting the offsite utility and the other one is approving a resolution.
Well, the the item that's 8.2A that's before you now does not have a resolution associated with it. It's just a motion to authorize the mayor to sign the easement documents on behalf of the city. So on 8.2A, there's no resolution associated with that. And I don't believe Commissioner Ryan's motion made any reference to a resolution.
Okay, I didn't think so. Okay, I wanted to make sure. Okay, we have a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to accept an off-site utility easement and 2 drainage easements on behalf of the city. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Passes 4-1. Okay, that will bring us to 8.2B. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor or Commissioner Ryan, I misheard what you said. So, okay.
So this is item 8.2B. There is a resolution associated with it, which is 27905. And it's to consider approval of an agreement with Magnolia Hills Incorporated for dedication of a stormwater detention basin that serves this subdivision. And since 1993, the city of Salina has basically given residential subdivision developers 2 choices as far as maintaining stormwater detention areas. The first is that they can form a homeowners association, which can own and maintain that detention facility. Or the other alternative is they can deed the pond over to the city with payment of a maintenance fee. And at the time that policy was adopted, it was based on the estimated cost of maintaining the basin for 10 years. And we've identified for you in the first paragraph, there are a number of existing ponds that the city maintains. The most recent ponds that the city received dedication of were 2 ponds in the Grand Prairie Edition. Those are owned and maintained by the city and maintained by golf course staff. The remainder of the ponds are maintained by general services in the Public Works Department. There's a couple examples that we cited where, including the Mariposa Edition and in River Trail, where there are storm drainage facilities that are owned and maintained by a homeowners association. So when this plat was approved, the developers were given those 2 options. They've indicated they don't wish to form a homeowners association solely for the purpose of maintaining a pond, and they've expressed desire to deed it over to the city for maintenance. The city staff, the Public Works Department, came up with a estimate of $46,137. Those would be the cost to maintain this pond over a 10-year period. And so an agreement to dedicate has been developed based on that cost estimate. And if this agreement is entered into, then there would be a deed prepared, and that deed would be signed by the members of Magnolia Hills Incorporated, and that would transfer title over to the city, and we would receive payment for that. As far as a fiscal note, we would have ongoing maintenance responsibility for this detention basin, similar to the other ones that we maintain throughout the city. And so your options would be to approve the attached resolution that would authorize the mayor to execute an agreement for dedication of the stormwater detention pond with Magnolia Hills, Inc. You could postpone consideration of this matter to a future meeting date if you want staff to provide you with additional information or the developers to provide you with that. Or you could decline to approve the agreement for dedication of a stormwater detention pond and provide further direction to staff and to the developers. So the agreement that has been the agreement used since 1993 is attached to your packet. The city Public Works Department has used the same methodology for determining their cost estimate. And so it's based on 10 years of maintenance.
Question,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis. Just hypothetically, if the detention pond proves to be inadequate to handle the runoff, does the city pay for whatever piping, trenching, whatever be needed to divert that water elsewhere? Or is that the responsibility of the surrounding homeowners, like through a special assessment?
Well, in accepting it, we have stated that the staff has gone out and inspected it. The city engineers have reviewed it as to capacity. And so from a capacity standpoint and a design and construction standpoint, it meets all of our criteria. And so if it proves to be inadequate or it would fail in the future, once the deed is transferred to the city, it would be the city's responsibility. Because we wouldn't be at this point if it hadn't been inspected and found to meet all of our criteria.
Right. I'm just thinking of a nearby neighborhood, that alleged that its detention pond was going to be unduly taxed by runoff from an adjacent development. To where the factors could change to where down the road that pond might not be adequate. I don't know the specific geography enough to know where the water is going to run into this thing from, but in a situation like that, is that something that, the cost of rectifying that would be spread among the houses that benefit from the improvement?
Well, this pond is quite large, and one of the reasons it's quite large is that it receives runoff from the adjoining property to the northwest, and it also receives runoff from the First Covenant Church property to the south. The First Covenant Church property has its own detention pond, which already captures all of its runoff, and then it is going to have a controlled release. And the property referred to as Wheatland Valley to the northwest, it's going to have its own stormwater detention pond. So the water that enters this site from offsite is going to be detained in its own pond before it's released.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, other questions?
I just had a couple, Commissioner Hodges here. I just had a couple of questions. In the staff report, it says that examples of detention areas which are owned and maintained by homeowners associations include the pond in the Mariposa Edition and the Old River Oxbow in the River Trail Edition. But then when I look down into the fiscal note, it would seem to indicate, are those maintained by Public Works or are those maintained by the homeowners associations?
Both the Mariposa Edition and in River Trail Edition, there's a homeowners association. There are dues that are assessed, and those are mowed and maintained by the homeowners association, not by the city.
Okay. And I remember that there was some discussion when we were discussing Grand Prairie about the burden that had been placed on the Mariposa detention pond. And so the city does not have any role then in any upgrades or maintenance for the Mariposa detention pond?
Well, in the case of the Mariposa detention pond, a lot of the concern was the fact that much of the runoff that comes into that pond comes from the city's property, which is the municipal golf course, although that's not developed property, so it's not post-development runoff per se, but it is correct that the Mariposa pond accepts some runoff that comes off the golf course. The concern in Grand Prairie was that there was a proposed increase in density or intensification, and there was concern that increase in density over the original could result in additional runoff. But the original developers of Grand Prairie paid compensation to the Mariposa Homeowners Association in recognition of that some of their post-development runoff does go through the Mariposa pond before it it reaches the Smoky Hill River. And so there was compensation that was paid to Mariposa to help them with their maintenance fund.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew, for that explanation. I appreciate it. So this detention area is going to be located outside the boundaries of the subdivision that's currently under discussion. I remember we had that discussion about whether residents on a certain part of the subdivision were going to be held responsible for any upgrades to Holmes Road. So I'm assuming that the detention area is not going to be solely in the area that we're talking about that's under discussion, that's like attached to the Markley Road half of that development?
Well, based on the action that you just took, this was dedicated as a stormwater detention easement. So it's a public easement. It's restricted to detention only. It can't be used for any other purpose, but it's being sized and will ultimately, if we assume that there's going to be another phase that goes over to Holmes Road, it will be probably called Magnolia Hills Estates number 3. And this detention pond will also serve the lots in that phase. We're doing all this now because there's no assurance as to if or when that next phase might happen. So we're treating this as essentially it's an off-site improvement that's benefiting Magnolia Hills Estates number 2. If the next phase occurs and it goes over to Holmes Road, then they're already going to have their detention pond in place, located and sized accordingly, and it's just a matter of directing the runoff into the pond. But it has been sized for the future development as well.
Okay, thank you. And then when we were looking at special assessments for this development, were pond costs included in the costs that we were looking at in terms of staff has broken it down with our special assessment policies in terms of, maintenance, ongoing maintenance and upgrades that would be required of our other infrastructure throughout the next, for the duration of the special assessments and beyond. Do we take into account the costs of maintaining these drainage ponds and drainage areas when we're considering those other costs?
The assessments relate to the actual cost of the construction of the streets, the actual cost of construction of the water lines and the sewer lines, the actual cost of construction of the detention basin. But the assessments are for the construction costs only. The assessments don't take into account.
Right. I understand that, but when we look at special assessments now, we also take a look at what it's going to cost to maintain that infrastructure in the future. Like the future, I mean, we take that into consideration too. I know that staff has spent a lot of time from different departments figuring out, what our ongoing maintenance obligations are going to be for that infrastructure into the future. And my question is just, when we're considering that, do we consider any detention basin, detention pond at that same time? Was that presented with the original like infrastructure and the projected infrastructure maintenance costs?
I'm certain that we did for the water lines and sewer lines. I am not positive that was taken into account when the initial analysis was done as to the eligibility of this phase for special assessments. But the $46,137 amount is based on the city's actual experience that we have with maintaining the other residential ponds. So that $46,000 number represents a 10-year estimate of the 10-year cost for the city to maintain this facility.
Okay, and then, and I thank you. I understand that 46,000 represents the 10-year cost for the mowing and the silt removal. But our responsibility doesn't end in 10 years, does it? Our meaning the city, we have the responsibility in perpetuity, correct?
That is correct. And it was a policy decision that was made by the city commission at the time that you could use 25 years, you could use 50 years, you could use 100 years, but that if you started getting into the higher years, you could reach a point where the dollar amount was not feasible for the development. So the city commission at that time arrived at 10 years, recognizing that when the policy was adopted, flooding and especially subdivision flooding was a bigger issue than drought. And there was a recognition that the city was in a better position from a public drainage standpoint to keep all these facilities functioning and maintained. So the 10 years was based on essentially that was feasible. It's only recovering the costs from those 10 years. And that was a policy decision that the city commission reached in adopting that policy.
Thank you. It's helpful to know that justification. Commissioner Hodges here again. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to identify myself. And I think that, and this is not directed at staff because obviously a policy decision was made by the governing body at that time, but a 10-year, maintenance capture of maintenance costs, it just strikes me, from years 11 on, that means that downtown residents and residents that are in established neighborhoods are taking on that responsibility too. And that's just a difficult one for me. Thank you very much for all your information, Mr. Andrew.
Commissioner Hodges, this is Lauren Driscoll, Director of Community and Development Services. I think something else worth noting in this is that when we assess a road or sewer, we are assessing the overall cost of that item over a duration of time. When we're talking about the ponds, that's a maintenance cost. And so from my understanding and talking and looking at the policy, we can't assess maintenance through the same way that we're doing that. We can assess the cost of something, know what it is, and push that out through a duration, but the regular maintenance of something, we can't assess like that. So that's why we have that 10-year increment. There are other ways, and I think both City Manager Sprague and I have talked about it might be time to look at that policy since it's been since the early 90s when we've done that. It's my understanding the history of that is pretty involved, and some of the other mechanisms for retrieving those costs might take a little bit more work and discussion. But that's where this is done differently than rather assessing it up front. We look at that 10-year increment.
So Mike Sprague here, just to clarify that it is correct that that's how the assessment works. But as we amended our special assessment policy, however long ago that was, we created a matrix whereby we look at our maintenance costs when we talk about the feasibility and
Right.
advisability of special assessments in the first place. So I think what Commissioner Hodges is referring to is not the allocation of that cost by specials, but that discussion and analysis we do in the feasibility and advisability stage.
Okay.
Just one question, Commissioner Davis. What are the options if you don't have land available for a detention pond? I'm assuming some provision has to be made for that water drainage when the development is planned.
We've had the rare occasion where I can think of 2 instances where there was no land and there were essentially storm water vaults that were constructed underground. So I'm aware of one postage stamp commercial property where their detention was built underground underneath the property, and over where the Hong Kong buffet is on South 9th Street, they have their detention underneath the parking lot instead of on the surface. But in terms of planning and laying out a subdivision, having a drainage study and grading plan done up front, that's one of the first things that the developer has to look at, is identify both where and how much land area would have to be given up for a detention pond. But if you don't want to give up land for a detention pond, then you're looking probably at storing something underground.
So then to restate Commissioner Hodges' contention that this is a known commodity that gets turned over to the city at large as an ongoing maintenance problem.
Well, it's a known commodity because of the, and the other ones are closer together, but there's no less than 6 stormwater detention ponds that are east of Ohio and north of Cloud Street that the city maintains and has maintained for an extended period. So the staff in general services is pretty well versed on what their frequency is of mowing and other things. The other variable is whether a pond has a pump or not, because if it has a pump, then that's an additional maintenance item and responsibility.
So Mike Scraig here again, and to clarify a little bit, it is a known commodity in terms of a required improvement that's expected of the developer to construct to our design standards. What isn't necessarily known, because the way the policy is set, the developer has the option of electing to retain it for homeowners association maintenance, or to make this type of payment and turn over ownership and maintenance to the city. So, when we talk about anticipating our maintenance costs, that is dependent on how the developer elects to proceed, whether they want to retain it with homeowner association maintenance or pay that 10-year fee to turn it over to the city. But in either instance, the design parameters are set, the sizing results from that, and it is a required improvement as part of the development. The initial cost is paid by the developer.
And the cost that, and you may have touched on this, but is the current cost of maintaining the detention ponds we already have in line? I mean, I don't know how after the 10 years, there's no more money coming in, but is there a rough dollar figure for maintaining those? I mean,
well, we have a spreadsheet that they put together for their weekly events, their mowing and trimming, and their semi-annual events. And so they have it broken down by the amount of labor, the amount of equipment, and the materials that they would use. But there's inspection, there's mowing and trimming, and there's occasional spraying, and less frequently the flumes need to be cleaned if there has been some erosion or built up in silt in the flumes. But those are the kind of activities that occur with a stormwater detention pond.
okay, and this is more an issue for greenfield development. I'm assuming there's not an analogous situation in the central portion of the city that the sewer system carries all this water out.
Well, the much of the storm sewers in the developed part of the city are too small and they're overloaded, which results in street flooding. So the city has had a stormwater detention requirement since 1980. So subdivisions that were developed before that time did not have to have a stormwater detention solution. But the city has gone back into some of the infill neighborhoods and has had to replace or upsize storm sewer pipes to accommodate additional runoff. There's been a project on Prescott. There was a project on Claflin that ran in front of Kansas Wesleyan that redirected water from 9th and Claflin, which flooded frequently, over to the 2nd Street slough. So there have been drainage projects performed by the city in the areas of the city that don't have detention to try to address issues that arise because there is not any detention.
Thank you for the information. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy City Manager, do we have any participants out there?
No, we do not.
Okay, Mayor Hoppick here. I will bring it back to the City Commission for action.
Mayor Hoppick, I move we approve Resolution 207905, authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement for dedication of a stormwater detention pond with Magnolia Hills Incorporated.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 20-7905. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
That passes 4-1. Okay, that will bring us to 8.3.
Item 8.3, resolution number 20-7908, authorizing the mayor to execute a third amendment to transferee agreement with the Salina Educational Automotive Museum of America.
Mr. Scragg.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. In the staff report, I provided you some background of the downtown Starbond project, and I'll take the liberty of not going into that in detail and offering to answer questions if you have them. But the car museum project was kind of the capstone project as far as Starbond eligibility and securing approval of the Department of Commerce for our Starbond project in the downtown. It's always been formatted with $4,695,000 of Starbond proceeds dedicated to the project. So it's a little unique compared to other transferee projects where whether you pick a retail development or whatever the case may be, where they fund and get reimbursed. At the very outset, it was anticipated that the bulk of this project would be funded with Starbond proceeds, and those funds would be made available as the project was constructed and completed. Having said that, the overall project budget has always exceeded the $4,695,000, and the original transferee agreement provided that the Salina Educational Auto Museum of America, which is their corporate name for the car museum, was responsible for the additional cost above and beyond the Starbond contribution. So the first two amendments related to commencement of the project and completion deadlines of the project, and those were all dependent on other aspects of the Starbond project getting started and Starbond proceeds being escrowed and not being available until certain conditions were met. This item relates to an opportunity that the museum recognized to acquire an additional storefront. And if you've seen the attached renderings, they're kind of barrel roofed storefronts, and it combines storefronts north of what used to be a city parking lot on 4th Street. We agreed to dedicate the parking lot to the project, and then it included barrel roofed storefronts on the south side of that parking lot. Well, they had the opportunity to acquire one more storefront, and in so doing, then the improvement that they proposed or originally planned on the former city parking lot could be a single-story structure instead of a two-story structure. When all is said and done, accounting for the cost of acquisition and the cost savings associated with a one-story new construction compared to two, that represents about a $500,000 savings to the project overall. Doesn't change the amount of the Starbond contributions, essentially doesn't change the scope of the project in terms of footprint and offerings, but it does represent a cost savings for the project overall. And so the representatives of the project approached me and asked for an amendment to the transfer agreement to account for that change in scope. Staff consulted with bond counsel who assisted us through the Starbond process. We also secured confirmation from the Department of Commerce and the Secretary of Commerce that they found that change to be acceptable and in keeping with their approval of the Starbonds. And so what you have before you this evening is an amendment to the transferee agreement to account for that change in scope. And then also to, now that the project's been bid and they have a contract, it created the opportunity to provide a more detailed budget as well. So It's really changing two attachments to the agreement. The first exhibit is the scope of the project, and it is titled Exhibit A, I believe. Bear with me a second. Yes, Exhibit A, description of the transferee project. They have provided some new footprint that reflects the expanded footprint on the single-story level. They provided a couple of new renderings that reflect that additional storefront. And then the other amendment is Exhibit C2, which is the budget, and it itemizes the allocation of the Star Bond funds to the project in that same original amount of $4,695,000. And then it also provides a separate column that itemizes the additional expenses that will be the responsibility of the Salina Educational Automotive Museum Association. So in the end, the transfer agreement's been amended to reflect that change in scope. It was originally enacted by the City Commission and Salina 2020. So it's a three-party agreement between the Car Museum Association, the city, and Salina 2020. And as I said, it's met the approval of the Department of Commerce. So from a fiscal note standpoint, there's no change in expense or no added expense to the city. It's really our consenting to their taking advantage of the opportunity that presented itself and modifying the scope as I described. So the options that you have before you are to approve the resolution, which would authorize executing the amendment to the agreement. You could approve it with amendments as you see fit. You could postpone consideration to a specified date and time and provide additional direction on any information that you'd like to request for further consideration. Or you could take no action, resulting in the transfer agreement remaining unchanged. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I don't really have a question, just a comment. I notice all the drawings we get, artist renditions of the plaza where Iron Street crosses the culvert or river, whatever you want to call it, and of this museum always seem to make the train tracks disappear. And it's just something for future thought. These aren't truly accurate artist renditions without a plan to move those tracks. But not requesting any action. I'm just making a comment.
Yeah, well, the tracks definitely have not disappeared, and they're not planned to disappear. In fact,
Right.
they represent a planning challenge. Related to this project, Martha Tasker with the Utilities Department has worked closely with the project and the railroad to meet expectations about extending a water line under the railroad tracks, and looked at alternatives. And then as we designed the river project, it's definitely factored into that design work as well.
Okay, other questions? Okay. Mr. Wood, do we have any participants?
There are none.
Okay. With that, I will bring it back to the commission for action.
Mr. Mayor, move approval of resolution 20-7908.
Second.
We have a motion, a second, to approve resolution number 20-7908. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Okay, do we have any other business to bring before the commission?
I do have one item for you, but I'll defer to others at first.
I was just going to thank the staff for putting together this Zoom, especially Mr. Wood for working that all out. And to Lauren, I think that was, I don't know whose idea it was to accept the public comment in the room just so they could just come to the podium and speak to us. But I think that worked pretty well for the public forum. Thank you.
Fully agree. Job well done.
Guessing we'll do this again in 2 weeks based on. So.
And those comments actually relate to the item I want to bring up, another business. This is new technology. If you recall back to March, we did the calling bridge, and there was some request for could we look at a different technology. And I think this is more effective in terms of sound quality and reliability, those type of things. But one of the things that we really have had to staff through, and I think we'll continue to have to staff through, is public participation. Other communities that have gone to this technology have discontinued public participation. And as you well know, it's not a required element of a public meeting. Being able to observe the meeting is, but actual public comments not required. We approached this that, we wanted to maintain public participation, transparency, public involvement as much as possible, as much as the technology allows. And I think we're going to continue to learn as we go. The reason that Ms. Driscoll had accommodated the comment in the main chambers was we'd advertised the public hearing, and it was kind of a transition issue for people that weren't able to interface with the technology. And we felt an obligation, if the public hearing was going to meet its original published intent, we needed to do that. You may have noticed this evening that in addition to the public comments that you've been receiving, there's been this ongoing dialogue in the chat box, which was a concern at the outset of how we manage that. And we're going to need to talk about that a little bit in terms of, I don't know that that's the intent of public comment. We'll see if we can get that managed. We also spent some time anticipating if this format generates broader participation, whether it's locally or regionally or beyond, we need to be prepared to accommodate that and or talk about whether we want to, whether that impacts our willingness to have public comment at all. So I'm not, at this point, I'm not at all recommending we discontinue public comment, but the Zoom format is a little bit different. I've seen other communities struggle with it, kind of get inundated with feedback in general and inappropriate commentary going on behind the scenes, and we're just going to have to pay attention to that as we go forward. So,
Is it possible for all of the chat comments to be directed to the host, and then have some policy as to what gets read? I'm obviously obscene comments wouldn't get read, but if a question was brought for a particular topic, if that person wasn't able to connect or didn't want to speak in this format, the host could read the question?
I think the more effective approach that I've seen is encouraging people that they can provide comments, written, email, whatever the case may be, in advance of the meeting, and then directing all the comments to kind of Zoom participation. The difficulty with those chat comments is it's no longer giving someone the floor and a specified amount of time to make their comment and then respond. It becomes a multiple party running dialogue as you're deliberating, and that can get unmanageable.
Right. That's what I was having directed to the host only, rather than to other individuals.
There is actually an option to just allow chat where it would be a private chat between the individual and the host. So we could set that up so that if somebody didn't know how to raise their hand, but they could get into chat, they could say, I would like to chat, or I would like to speak. I'd have to think about how we would manage, if somebody wants to, individually type questions or whatever, how that might work. But we certainly can turn the chat off, so it doesn't show up in the same way that it did tonight. Not something I anticipated, to be honest with you, or I might have done that before this meeting.
And not to belabor the point, but I understand the approach that you're suggesting, Commissioner Davis, but you could very well have chat going on while you're voting on the item, and you could have chatting that it could equate to 10, 15, 20 minutes of what would otherwise be public comment, because it's unlimited. And so that's a dynamic that we're going to need to sort through.
How does the chat feature play into the idea that it is a public meeting, and if you're paying attention to the activity on Zoom, how do you focus on chat and vice versa? I just see it as a distraction.
Fair. That's my concern as well.
But it's another channel of communications coming in, and typically, I think in public comment, our approach has been it's something we listen to, but we don't necessarily get into debates on the floor with individuals with specific questions. We listen to their concerns, but it's not a matter of justifying one position or another.
Nor do we have members of the audience getting in a side conversation by way of public comment, which they
Right.
can in chat.
Yeah,
Particularly since we just passed rules saying there should be no extra conversation going on during the meeting. I mean,
yeah.
this would be, really a violation of our own rules.
And so I'm not asking for any direction from you at the moment, just calling to your attention that I think it went very well at our first attempt, and we'll continue to monitor and adapt and
We'll monitor and we'll see if we get any feedback from the public. The
only comment I might have, and please take it constructively, is the sound on some of the staff presentation was shaky, and specifically the ones that came from I think it's the finance conference room. If I recognize it, that sound pickup was not very good, and I had a real problem following that. Now I don't know if that was my speaker at my end or if that was a transmission at their end.
I think it was transmission.
I was noticing it as well.
Yeah, we'll certainly address that.
So I don't know what the answer is. I know they're working through a telephone, and sometimes that presents some unique issues.
Well, one thing for sure, I'm going to go to a nice furniture store and buy me a nice comfortable chair that I can sit in without moving for 5 hours. And
the one time I stepped away,
got a way to drink and slurp off camera and off microphone. Muting myself. So sorry that you had to deal with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thing to come before the commission? If not, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Oh, one question. I'm sorry. The letter that the city manager is going to write for the neighboring counties, is that going to just go into the mayor's signature, or do the rest of us need to be available to sign it, or how is that going to work?
Well, in my mind, the first thing I need to do between now and county commission meeting in the morning is extend the invitation to them to participate in that communication. And then you'd also mentioned the hospital. So it may be that the representatives of each would be the most appropriate. If we expand that to boards and commissions, that'll be an entire page of signatures.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Good.
We adjourn?
Mayor Hoppick, move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Be safe, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.